Chapter 181. Qian'er's hands were sore from receiving the gifts, but when she looked at these people, her gaze was gentle but tinged with hostility. She knew very well that her husband was a soldier and a soldier had to go to the battlefield. Once on the battlefield, life and death were determined by fate. It was either the death of the enemy or the death of one's own men. If something were to happen to her husband one day, then it would definitely be the doing of these people who were giving her gifts with kind smiles on their faces. With this in mind, she still had to accept the gifts from these people. Listening to the sincere congratulation from these people, this pure and kind girl couldn't help but feel a sense of absurdity from the bottom of her heart. By now, Yutong's troops from all four sides had dispersed. Even the tables and chairs that stretched for dozens of miles had been cleaned up. It was as if nothing had ever happened on this quiet piece of land. Finally, it was time for the banquet to end. However, the generals' gazes were filled with reluctance as they looked at the empty field. Was this the end of the matter? Had the military event that had stirred the entire continent ended just like that? For a moment, they felt a sense of loss. I could clearly feel it just now. An old general of Dayuan shut his eyes tightly. I could clearly feel that they were all here just now, they were all drinking with me. The few old marshals who heard this shuddered, their hearts pounding, their minds unfocused. Not only this old general, but all of the old generals present had a very clear feeling just now. Those comrades who had died on the battlefield all these years were gathered around them. All of them were beaming. They were all elated. They were still united in life and death, sharing weal and woe as they had been in the past. Qiu Jianhan heaved a long sigh. So many brothers have been sent away after so many years, on the other side. Han Sanhe sighed slowly. Qiu Jianhan's gaze was sharp. It's over, aren't all of you going to scram? Are you all addicted to drinking and want to drink a few more times? I'm telling you old men, don't even think about it. There won't be a second time for such a good thing. Han Sanhe rolled his eyes and said with a smile, there's still some time before the deadline of the letter of credence. Why are we in such a hurry to leave? Why can't we drink a few more times? You're not willing to entertain us, but who knows if someone else will be willing to entertain us. Leng Daoyin said faintly, Brother Han and you bunch of old killers, stop dreaming. If you don't leave now, I'm afraid, it'll really be too late. Tiantang City does not welcome any of you. Each of you bears the blood debt of no less than 100,000 Yutong people. Leng Daoyin spoke slowly, if any accident were to happen here, it would be a pity. Han Sanhe shook his head and said with a smile, don't lie in front of a real person. Such a worry would probably exist in any other country, but only in Yutong as it is now. The first reason this old man has come is naturally to participate in this grand event of militants. The second is to pay a visit to the residence of 9 Supremes and pay my respects to the spirits of the 9 Supremes. After that, I'll go to the family of generals' ancestral hall to pay my respects to the Shengguan family's ancestors, and then I'll go to the 1,000 Feet Lake to take a look. Other than that, there's the Broken Saber Pavilion that's renowned throughout the continent, and the Hall of Valor that all the militants in the world look up to. Han Sanhe said slowly, these are all places that I must go. If I come to Yutong's capital but don't visit these places, then I'll truly be returning empty-handed from a treasure trove. The real opportunity cannot be missed. Qiu Jianhan's expression darkened at once. Han Sanhe counted the places, the residence of 9 Supremes, the family of generals' ancestral hall, the 1,000 Feet Lake, the Broken Saber Pavilion, and the Hall of Valor. If he were to visit all of these places, it would take him at least 5 days. If he were to drag it out, he could even drag it out in 10 days. Moreover, there were a few places that even someone like Han Sanhe would linger around and forget to return. He would never get tired of looking at them. Even staying here for a period of time was something that he could not ask for more than anything else. But now, at such a sensitive time, this old man was acting like this. Could it be that he harbored evil intentions and wanted to make a big move? Old man Han is right. Another old man chuckled and came forward. The few of us are going to visit these places as well. Qiu Jianhan, Ling Daoyin, and Tai Zheng's expressions darkened at the same time. All three of them understood this very well. Others might meet with misfortune or mishap in Yutong, but these old men were not worried about their own safety at all. That was because if an accident happened to them, then there would be great trouble in the future. They only had students and old friends in the country, but it was unknown how many of them there were. It could easily cause an unprecedented storm. It could even be said that the soldiers under the disciples and generals of the 6 marshals of the 5 empires who were here now made up more than 70% of the total military strength of the 5 empires. If anything were to happen to these people, the entire empire of Yutong would have to face the wrath of more than 70% of the 4 empires' armies. What was worse was that the other party was righteous and had a good reason to do so. The saying that the people would be plunged into misery and suffering was not just for show. Qiu Jianhan and the others dared not provoke such a super hornet's nest, they were even more unwilling to do so, they could not do so. These old men had come so casually this time, who knew what they had planned in the dark? Qiu Jianhan would not believe it even if he was beaten to death if he were to say that there was no plan at all. Forget everything else, Qiu Jianhan could not see through the 5,000 people that Han Sanhe had brought with him. If there were no peerless experts among these 5,000 people who could fight against 10,000 people alone, no pinnacle martial artists who were confident in leading Han Sanhe out of Tiantang City, Qiu Jianhan would willingly tear his head off and kick it like a ball. It was too absurd. It's the period of the letter of credence for peace now. Of course, you can enter the city for a tour. Qiu Jianhan's expression was cold as he said, however, it's impossible for all 5,000 of you to enter the city. You can decide how you want to choose. If you cause any trouble, not only will there be no mercy, Yutong will only punish you harshly. Why are we bringing 5,000 people in? Han Sanhe said with a smile, his eyes squinted. Even if you let all of us in, Tiantang City won't have enough guest rooms to accommodate us. Each country can only bring 50 people into the city. The other old men smiled with squinted eyes as well. Not bad, not bad. 50 people is more than enough. Qiu Jianhan snorted coldly and said, even so, we don't have much time to entertain you. Han Sanhe chortled. What do we need you to entertain us for? We're planning to have fun in the city. Can we really enjoy ourselves with all of you accompanying us? If we really feel bad about it, send someone to bring us around. We'll be grateful for your hospitality. Qiu Jianhan heaved a sigh of relief and said, who do you want to accompany you? Officials from the Board of Rights? Han Sanhe's eyes were still squinted as he said, we're all militants. What's the point of having those scholars accompany us? I don't want the military to send anyone either. It's even worse if we hide our grudges and exchange pleasantries. Why don't we have the young lad called Yunyang from Tai Zheng's wedding accompany us for a tour? That child is handsome and pleasing to the eye. It's most appropriate for him to accompany us old fellows for a tour. According to what I know, that fellow is the only son of Marquis of Heavenly Clouds. He's neither a scholar nor a warrior, unlike the rich and idle people from either the military or the government. Qiu Jianhan was startled. Yunyang? You've taken a liking to him? That's right. This old man finds this child pleasing to the eye. Han Sanhe looked into Qiu Jianhan's eyes quietly. After a long while, he said, Old Qiu, are you not even going to give someone like this to you? The old marshals from the other countries had no idea what Han Sanhe wanted this handsome fellow for, but they instinctively chimed in, that's right, that's right. We want this young lad. We all want him as well. Qiu Jianhan's expression was cold as he rejected decisively, this child is out of the question. You've said it yourself. He's the only son of Marquis of Heavenly Clouds. Marquis Yun isn't in the city now. How can this old man have the right to assign a mission to his only son? This was a polite remark, but it was also the truth. The Marquis of Heavenly Clouds was not only a supreme noble in Yutong, he was also an existence that transcended the court officials. Even His Majesty the Emperor could only invite him but could not order him around. Old Marshal Qiu indeed had no right to order Yun Yang to do anything. The deeper reason, or rather, the real reason, was that Yun Yang was the last straw to prolong His Majesty's life. Not even the slightest risk could be taken. Now that His Majesty's treatment had reached a critical juncture, it was impossible for Qiu Jianhan to allow Yun Yang to follow Han Sanhe. How could Qiu Jianhan be willing to let Yun Yang follow Han Sanhe? If anything were to go wrong, it would be a major event that would shake Yutong. Old Marshal has given the residents of Marquis Yun too much face. This nephew is young and narrow-shouldered, I'm indeed incompetent. However, it's not a big deal for the few old sirs to want me to accompany them on a sightseeing trip. Other than keeping cats and playing with dogs, I don't have anything important to do at home. It's good for me to look at the scenery, talk about the accident and have some fun with the few old sirs. A gentle voice cut in. It was Yun Yang. Han Sanhe looked at Yun Yang with a smile. Young Master Yun's words have made us old men sound like we're cats and dogs. This old man wants him to follow us even more. I really don't know how Lord Yun gave birth to such an outstanding son. Qiu Jianhan opened his mouth and said, he's just a useless person. Han Sanhe, you can just take him. With a huff of his sleeves, he turned and left on his horse. The old marshal had obviously realized that his behavior was out of line. Even if Yun Yang was the only son of Marquis of Heavenly Clouds and had an extraordinary status, he was still a wealthy idler deep down. There was nothing important about him. However, the old marshal's firm rejection had already hinted at Yun Yang's capability, a capability that he could not afford to lose. Yun Yang's intervention now was like trying to mend the barn after the sheep had been lost, but it had to be mended or else there would be endless trouble in the future. Han Sanhe looked at Qiu Jianhan's retreating silhouette and smiled meaningfully. This old man was meticulous and good at calculating people's hearts. It would be strange if he did not notice something in Qiu Jianhan's reaction. Then, young Master Yun, during this period of time, we old folks shall be entrusted to young Master Yun's care. Han Sanhe looked at Yun Yang with a smile. Chapter 182. Yun Yang thought to himself, no grudge against me? These words really gave me a toothache. The grudge between us is huge. If it wasn't for the fact that I can't do it, I would really like to send all of you old men to hell. Are you looking forward to the tour of Yutong's capital city so much? This young master will take good care of all of you. The 5 empires candidates to enter the city were quickly selected. Each empire had 50 slots while the rest were stationed outside the city. On Han Sanhe's side, Zhang Gu, Gao Han, and Mu Wuyun, the 3 generals, were definitely among them. What Yun Yang found strange was that there was also a young man among the candidates. The young man had a dark complexion and was not tall. When he stood up straight, he only reached Yun Yang's chin. He was thin and weak, wearing a loose black robe. When he walked, he looked like he was floating. His overall coordination could be considered odd. However, the person's eyes were like dark, icy pools. When he looked at Yun Yang even felt as if he was being seen through. This person followed beside Han Sanhe, not saying a word, only following him. However, Yun Yang noticed that Zhang Gu, Gao Han, and the others rarely spoke to this person. Even when they did interact, it was only for a short while, as if they were wary of each other. Yun Yang scratched his head, understanding dawning in his heart. It looked like this fellow was most likely a real heavyweight. The people chosen by the other few old marshals from the empires all had their own hidden agendas as well. With a glance, Yun Yang could see a few fellows who had been intentionally hidden. Although these people were well hidden, who was Yun Yang? How sharp was his eyesight? As long as Yun Yang paid attention, there were not many in this world who could completely hide from him in this aspect. It's best that everyone finds an inn and stays together. Yun Yang suggested, this way, we can maintain a unified movement when we go out for the tour. As long as you listen to my arrangements, there's nothing to worry about. You found the right person to look for me. There's no interesting place in Tiantang City that I, Yun Yang, don't not know. In my opinion, everyone should stay at the biggest inn in the city, the Tower to Heaven Inn. That's the biggest inn in Tiantang City. The location is excellent and the environment is even better. The food, drinks, and lodging are all top-notch. I'll bring some people to chase all the guests out in a moment. Yun Yang was exhilarated. This young master has a good reason to do this. Let's see who dares to move out of here. It's been a long time since I've had this feeling of dominating the market, especially against Yutong's top inn, the Tower to Heaven Inn. I must enjoy myself. The old marshals looked at Yun Yang's manner of speech and behavior, feeling dumbfounded and speechless for a long time. All of them looked at Han Sanhe, thinking, Old Han, you've spent the entire day talking to such an unreliable fellow as a guide. What do you mean by that? Was this really okay? 4 countries, 200 generals, a bunch of superb experts. Yun Yang laughed heartily. Let's help each other. No matter where we go, I'll book the entire place. Don't worry. The few famous brothels in Tiantang City have grudges with me in the past. This time, we'll visit them one by one. I guarantee that all of you will be entertained. Han Sanhe was exasperated. You want to bring so many generals from different countries to visit brothels and sleep with girls? There were 200 people from the 4 countries. All of their gazes were focused on Yun Yang, as if they were looking at a deity. What AF** king talent. What a great talent. A few old marshals glared at him, already looking like they were about to beat him up. There were dozens of other generals who exchanged glances with each other. After a while, they walked over and patted Yun Yang's shoulder with meaningful looks on their faces. There was no need for words to be spoken. Obviously, they felt that they had met a kindred spirit. A few bearded men came over and asked softly, Are there any high-class casinos? Casinos? Yun Yang patted his chest. Yes. Definitely high-class casinos. As long as you don't lose, we guarantee that everyone will feel at home in Tiantang City's casinos. The bearded men beamed like blooming chrysanthemums when they heard him. They patted Yun Yang's shoulder and said, Good brother, you're a great friend. Faced with such a chaotic and out-of-control situation, even the experienced Han Sanhe could not help feeling a headache coming on. This bastard had only said a few words when he came over, but he had already brought more than half of the generals from various countries into the gutter. Old Marshal Han is the most perceptive. You found the right person to ask me to be your tour guide. Who dares to challenge me in this aspect, be it the military or the government? I'm just that confident. Yun Yang patted his chest and said passionately, Those who want to listen to music and have fun, we have the best brothels in Tiantang City. Those who want to gamble and win, by something exciting, we have the best casinos in Tiantang City. Those who want to drink, we have the blood of the hero. The blood of the hero is open to us, it's absolutely authentic. If it's a little different from what we drank today, you'll be ruining my reputation. Hearing the words blood of the hero, the generals who had not moved earlier had their eyes gleaming. Someone asked doubtfully, This blood of the hero, isn't it a fine wine that only General Tai has? You can actually make it? The generals from various countries all wanted to bring back more blood of the hero. Even if they had to spend a fortune to buy it, even if they had to purchase it at a high price, they were more than willing to do so. After all, the title of wine exclusively for the world's militants was just too fitting. Even if the price was a little higher, they would still bring a batch back. After all, there were countless generals and soldiers in each of their camps who were looking forward to having a taste of the militants' wine. The amount of blood of the hero that Tai Zheng had promised to bring back to the armies was not a small amount, but compared to the actual demand, it was just a drop in the bucket. It was far from enough. However, this wine was truly not difficult for Yun Yang. It could even be said that it would not be easy for Tai Zheng to get his hands on more of this wine. After all, the true price of this wine was there for all to see. How much could a poor man like Tai Zheng buy, even if he were to go bankrupt? How many soldiers could he get drunk? However, to Yun Yang, it was really just a matter of a word. Don't worry, don't worry. Although the blood of the hero is rare, if this young brother wants it, I can have as much as I want. However, everyone should also understand that this is truly a fine wine, and its price is not cheap. Yun Yang then patted his chest and said, "This young brother doesn't have a lot of money, but I do have some money. When all the generals leave, each of you can have a pot. This young brother will give it to you according to the number of people. Who asked me to take a liking to soldiers? A pot for each of them." The dozens of generals who were moved by the smell of the wine rolled their eyes in unison. How could one pot be enough? It's not even enough for us, and yet you're saying it so generously. I thought you were going to say 10,000 pots for each of us. You're only giving each of us a pot and you're saying it like it's a big deal. Why are you all looking at me like that? Yun Yang's expression was one of displeasure. I'll have to fork out 1,500 silver taels for each of you to have a pot of the blood of the hero. Count yourselves, how many of you are here? There are 200 of you. *ck me, look at the way you're looking at me, as if I'm stingy. Forget it, since it's not going to please me, I won't give any more. There's not even one pot left. A pot of the blood of the hero costs 1,500 silver taels. A bearded general exclaimed, "Didn't Tai Zheng say it's 30 taels a pot?" The generals looked at Yun Yang. How could this child be so black-hearted? The price had risen by 50 times. Selling wine that costs 30 silver taels to us for 1,500 silver taels. This was not King black-hearted, it was pure black ink. Yun Yang snorted. 30 silver taels? Tai Zheng said 30 silver taels a pot, so it's 30 silver taels a pot. All of you have drunk this wine before, 20 caddies a pot. Tell me honestly, does this wine look like it's worth 1 silver tael a caddy? There were not many generals in the military who did not like wine. Hearing him, they shook their heads, understanding immediately. All of them had been drinking for years. While they might not be familiar with the quality of the wine, they at least had a good idea of its quality. The blood of the hero would cost at least 40 silver taels per caddy, and this was not even considering the appearance and gimmick of the blood of the hero. It was a joke to sell it for 1 silver tael per caddy. The blood of the hero that was served to all of you this time was provided to the military by Yutong's top tavern for this military event. Now that it's over, all of you still want to buy it with 30 silver taels. Is it because the wine is too delicious and all of you are still daydreaming? Which winemaker would do this in a normal transaction? To put it bluntly, they've already lost almost all of their assets for this single transaction. Do you really think the tavern owner is an idiot? Yun Yang squinted and said, after today's incident, Yutong's Board of War will definitely impose strict control on this wine and purchase it in bulk. To put it bluntly, even if you offered a high price, do you have a place to buy it? Let me tell you, even if you raise the price to 10,000 silver taels a caddy, you won't be able to buy it. Do you really think that you foreign soldiers are so popular? How dare you doubt me? My good intentions are treated as ill intent, humph. Yun Yang spat and said angrily, forget about the wine, I won't be giving it to you. Pretend I didn't say anything. Go buy it yourselves if you're capable. Let's see who has the ability to buy the blood of the hero from Yutong's top tavern. This topic is too heavy, let me bring all of you to the brothel and the casino. I still have to say this first, all of you have to fork out your own money. As the saying goes, treat food and drink, not prostitutes. There's only rape, there's no compulsion to gamble. Well, I'm not treating either of these anyway. The foreign generals felt their teeth clench. This child's words were *king unpleasant. After talking for so long, he actually said that they had to fork out their own money no matter what. This fellow was so stingy. However, why did this child's manner of speaking sound so much like someone from the military? Young Master Yun, have you served in the military before? Asked one of the men. Do I look like one? Yun Yang rolled his eyes. Nope. Chapter 183. I'm not writing anymore. My fingers are cramping, so I'll type a few words less. Asking for monthly votes and recommendation votes. I'm leaving to sleep. Chapter 184. Yun Yang was eloquent, his tongue as sharp as a knife. The generals were speechless. This fellow had been trying his best to act generous just now, but why had he turned into a stingy cat with sugar all over him now? Not only was he stingy, he was even ready to take some back at any time. In spite of this, everyone was helpless. 99% of what Yun Yang had said was true. That Yutong Premier Tavern must have a thing going on. It was true that they did not like their own country's soldiers but hated and even hated other countries. It was also true that they could not buy the wine. As for asking Tai Zheng to buy it, it was impossible. Yutong's board of military was probably worried about the price to purchase the blood of the hero in the future. Brother Yun, how much can you get? Name your price, I won't return a single coin. A bearded man grabbed Yun Yang's shoulder and said impatiently, I, old son, want it all. The generals beside him scolded, Son, how can you be so shameless? Let's not talk about whether you can buy it or not. What are we going to do if you want it all? Are you asking for a beating? General Sun's face was flushed red, but he insisted on not backing down. I'm talking about a deal here. We're willing to pay more. We have more people on our side. What's wrong with buying it all? The crowd scolded him, all of them indignant. *CKU. You have more people on your side? Who has less people on their side? Your father still has millions of soldiers on his side. King say you have more people? Is your country the only one that has money? What if we pay more for it all? General Sun was flushed, but he looked at Yun Yang. Brother Yun, please be fair. I only have one thing to say. I won't bargain. Yun Yang coughed. How should I put this? General, you're putting me on fire. If a pot of blood of the hero costs 1,500 silver taels, I can get 1,000,000 pots. Do you really want all of them? General Sun was dumbfounded. He counted with his fingers for a long time but he could not figure out how much silver taels he should spend. An old man beside him guffawed and said proudly, Bastard, you can't even figure this out? Let this old man tell you. If he took all of them, it would be 150 million taels of silver. Even if he sold himself, he wouldn't be able to afford it. A pig's nose with a spring onion stuck in it. You've ruined your appearance, haven't you? Pooh. Han Sanha spat and coughed violently, cough, 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 cough. The others who were quick-witted also burst into laughter and praised in unison, good calculation. I'm impressed. If you can really buy it at this price, I'll buy it at double the price, as many as you have. If it's really not enough to pay the bill, I'll go back and let the whole army become bandits. Ha ha ha. In the crowd, a few people also laughed, but their laughter was very awkward. Obviously, they couldn't figure out how much the bill was worth. They raised their 10 fingers and counted, scratching their ears and cheeks as they asked the people beside them in a low voice, "How much is the total of all the wine? Is it really that number?" The youth dressed in black behind Han Sanhe could not help grinning as well, revealing a mouthful of white teeth that were neat and beautiful. Yun Yang's eyes shone as he leaned over and asked, "Brother, what is your name? Why do you look so unfamiliar?" As he spoke, he was about to hug the youth's shoulder to show his affection. The black-faced youth dodged it nimbly, his eyes filled with disgust as he said in a low voice, "I'm just a nobody, young Marquis, you need not take it to heart. We shall never meet again after today." "How could that be? Let's not talk about it first. You're a guest, what do you mean by fate? We're fated to meet." Yun Yang had long known that this child was up to no good, so he wrapped an arm around him again. "Since we're fated to meet, how can we not be intimate?" A hint of anger flashed in the youth's eyes as he dodged the person's groping hand again and said, "Young Marquis Yun, please conduct yourself with dignity." Han Sanhe's gaze flickered as he stood in front of Yun Yang and laughed. Young Marquis Yun is indeed resourceful, to be able to obtain such an exquisite brew like the blood of the hero. Needless to say, Dongxian plans to purchase 50,000 pots of the blood of the hero from young Marquis Yun. Would young Marquis Yun be willing to help? Unbeknownst to them, they had already diverted Yun Yang's movements by thousands of miles. The youth dressed in black took the opportunity to hide far behind, mumbling something that no one knew what he was saying. However, it was definitely not something pleasant. Yun Yang laughed and retracted his groping hand regretfully, saying, "Since Marshal Han has spoken, how can it not be done? 50,000 pots is no problem. You'll have to pay first. 750 million silver taels, you'll have to give me half of it first. The goods will be delivered within 3 months. How about that? 750 million silver taels. How did you calculate that? Why don't you just go and die?" The youth dressed in black finally could not help but cry out. Han Sanhe chuckled and said, "All right, 75 million silver taels it is. I'll pass this sum to young Marquis Yun later, not a single coin less." Yun Yang scratched his head. Is it 75 million? Did I count wrongly?" He then began to count with his fingers as well. Han Sanhe chuckled helplessly. He could see that this guy was purely pretending to be confused. What if he really did not know how to calculate? That would be the biggest joke in the world. It had been a close call just now. If it had been someone else who was not clear-headed and agreed to it, there would have been endless trouble. As the saying went, a man's word was like the wind. If Han Sanhe had made a mistake, this fellow before him would definitely go back on his word. "We're indeed selling it at 1,500 silver taels per pot, but we won't mind if you pay 750 million silver taels for 50,000 pots. It's only reasonable for the seller to tip the seller when they're doing business." What's more, this was the price that Marshal Han Sanhe had agreed to personally in front of all the famed generals in the continent. Could Marshal Han's words have been nonsense? Of course, he would not give the money to him, but his reputation would be ruined along with it. "No matter how expensive this wine is, we still have to bring some back. Otherwise, won't we be blamed to death by our brothers when we return?" A general shook his head and sighed when he saw Han Sanhe starting to buy wine. Yun Yang asked curiously, "Didn't General Tai prepare some for you? Didn't you make a request beforehand?" Han Sanhe chuckled. "Young Marquis Yun is well informed indeed. You know that we made a request beforehand." Yun Yang laughed. "Why would Tai Zheng hide this from me? I'm his groomsman, I was there. Have you all forgotten?" The group thought about it and agreed with him. An old man pursed his lips and said, "A groomsman who can only reach the groom's stomach when he straightens his back. We've all seen it. You don't have to say it so gloriously." Young Marquis Yun, we'll remember your grace and glory forever. We won't dare forget it. As he spoke, the group of unscrupulous fellows guffawed. Yun Yang rolled his eyes and said, I'm not bad, am I not? Unlike some of the 200 of us. Forget the groom's stomach, he can't even reach the groom's buttocks. Isn't that right, some of you? As he spoke, he glanced at a tanned youth who was hiding at the back purposely to provoke them. The youth's eyes were burning with anger. If he had not restrained himself, he would have charged out and fought Yun Yang to the death. How did I end up being the victim of this conversation? The group chided him jokingly, let's talk about the wine, let's talk about the wine. One of them grumbled, that Marshal Tai of yours is really stingy. He's only given a quota of 20 pots for each country. What can 20 pots do? If we really bring these 20 pots back, it'll be gone with just a sniff, not to mention drinking it. This sentence almost made everyone burst out laughing. I see. We have to buy it then. Not only do we have to buy it, we have to buy it in large quantities. Marshal Han has asked for 50,000 pots, are there any other countries that want it? There won't be any left if we miss it. Those who want it, hurry up and open your mouth. There won't be another chance if we miss this one. Yun Yang was starting to earn money. It was no wonder that Yun Yang was so shameless as to buy the wine. He was really insanely poor now. Yun Yang could be said to be poorer than Tai Zheng. Both of them could be said to be brothers in the same boat, one poorer than the other. However, Tai Zheng's debt did not need to be repaid and he still had the 2 million taels as a foundation. Yun Yang, on the other hand, still owed him jade money. Now that there were so many idiots from other countries here, it would be a waste not to take advantage of them. Once he entered the city and came into contact with others, there would be nothing left for him to do. Therefore, Yun Yang began to look for people to sign the documents. He had to make sure that this heaven-sent fortune was a reality. Since Han Sanha had asked for 50,000 pots, the other countries would not be short of it. Each country had asked for 50,000 pots. After Yun Yang had signed the documents, he began to collect the deposit. It had to be said that he had collected half a carriage's worth of deposit. Each country had collected 20 million silver taels worth of banknotes first. In the blink of an eye, 80 million silver taels had been pocketed by a certain someone. Once the money was in his hands, young Master Yun was grinning from ear to ear. Please, please. Let's go to the tower to heaven in now. Everyone, please prepare yourselves. The tower to heaven inn is a great place, but it's a little expensive. I can't afford it anyway. Now, even Han Sanha was unwilling to speak to him. We are guests, and as the host, you should receive us well. You are especially despicable. You've just received a huge sum of 80 million silver taels from us and it's gone in the blink of an eye. You even want us to pay for the accommodation out of our own pockets. Who was this person? What kind of person was this? Yun Yang talked and laughed as he walked. He was in high spirits and seemed to be enjoying himself. However, he could clearly feel that there were at least 30 to 40 gazes from the 200 people following behind him. They were like sharp arrows that were trained on him. Every gaze was filled with deep probing and contemplation. Chapter 185. Anyone who was qualified to be a famous general of this era would not be someone with an undeserved reputation. Yun Yang sighed in his heart. He felt that the few oldest fellows beside him, even though their beards had turned white, were even more cunning than 1,000-year-old foxes. They were extremely experienced. It's late now. Everyone has come from afar and drunk a lot of wine. I'm sure you're all tired. Let's rest for the night. If you want to eat. Tower to Heaven Inn is very particular about this. You can eat whatever you want. As long as you have silver and can afford it, there's nothing you can't think of that can't be found here. Having arranged for so many people to stay in the Tower to Heaven Inn, Yun Yang was prepared to slip away. I still have to contact the wine. This thing is gaining momentum now, it's important to implement it as soon as possible. There's also the brothel and the casino, I have to greet them first, in case the boss isn't willing to entertain you all. This is my life of toil, I'll take my leave first. Yun Yang was all smiles, ignoring the generals who were urging him to stay, and slid out like a loach. What a joke, if I were to stay here, wouldn't I have to treat all of you to your meals and drinks? Do I look like a fool to you all? If you want me to treat, I'd be more than happy to put poison in the food. Yun Yang left without saying a word. There was no need to arrange anything, a few people were missing from each country's team at about the same time. Like a ghost, he disappeared without a trace. After a while, these people reappeared among the crowd. Han Sanhe glanced at the person who had returned beside him discreetly, his gaze filled with doubt. The person shook his head, his expression odd. Han Sanhe frowned as a voice came to his ears, that child only took a turn and disappeared. There are so many of us, so many pairs of eyes, but no one noticed how he disappeared. No one noticed that he had gone that way either. There's not even a trace of qi. How strange. The expert who had given chase was extremely frustrated by Yun Yang's disappearance as well. As a superb expert of 10th perfection, he could be called a master of his generation. Chasing a fifth peak shrimp was as easy as pinching a snail with 3 fingers, but he had lost him. He would be too embarrassed to talk about this when he returned. He had lost all his face. The generals of the other countries also received the same feedback. Instantly, all of them grimaced in pain, and some even had grave expressions. Tiantang City is indeed a place of hidden talents. Han Sanhe sighed softly and said, "Forget it. There's still time in the future. He still has to bring us around for another 10 days or so, there's no rush. There will come a time when we can figure out this guy's background." How did Yun Yang disappear after making a turn after leaving the door? It was very simple. Yun Yang used his wind-walking body to transform into the wind and disappear into thin air. Tracking me? Are you kidding me, bro? How many jars? Young Master Ma's heart almost exploded. 200,000 pots. Yun Yang crossed his legs. So many? Young Master Ma widened his eyes. It took us a long time to finish the Iron Commander's order. Not to mention the workers, even the managers are exhausted. Although 200,000 jars is not a large number, we may not be able to deliver the goods in a short period of time. I understand. It's fine as long as the first batch is delivered within 3 months. Yun Yang said reservedly, also, I won't ask you to pay for this batch. Just give me a fair price. Just tell me how much a pot is it? Young Master Ma could not help hesitating. The last time, it was 200 taels a pot. Especially at the last moment, he and his father had added another 40,000 pots on their own accord. The entire transaction had cost them close to 10 million taels. It was not a small loss. Brother Yun, why don't you name a price and I'll consider it. As long as it's enough, I won't say another word. Young Master Ma had learned his lesson and made the first bid. He could not hold himself back when Yun Yang pressed down on him. I said I won't ask you to pay, so I won't. Yun Yang said, 500 taels a pot this time, what do you think? 500 taels a pot? Young Master Ma almost jumped in joy. He had thought that he would have to work for nothing again, or that he would have to pay a sum of money. However, if it was 500 taels a pot of wine, the net profit of each pot would be more than 150 taels. Even after deducting the transportation fees to various countries, the most he could deduct was another 50 taels per pot. In addition to the base of 200,000 pots, it would be a profit of 20 million taels. Just this sum alone would be enough to recoup the 10 million taels he had lost previously and earn a lot more. If everything went smoothly and he could reduce some unnecessary expenses, it would not be impossible to earn a net profit of 20 million taels. Really? Young Master Ma's breathing quickened. It was obvious that he did not believe it was true. How could it be false? Yun Yang rolled his eyes. I've said it before, I'll let you earn more. Now, your chance to earn big money is here. Don't doubt me. 200,000 pots, and this is only the first batch. What's 200,000 pots when the reputation of this military wine is built up in the future? Young Ma, you have to look far ahead. I said that your house is Yutong's top tavern. Did you think I was joking? Thank you, Brother Yun. Young Master Ma bowed respectfully. I only know now that young Master Yun has given us a great source of wealth. No wonder my father would make such a decision back then. What decision? Yun Yang asked curiously. My father said that as long as this military wine makes a name for itself, as long as there are sales in the future, Brother Yun, you will get 10% of the profit. Young Master Ma's face was glowing. Yun Yang was rather surprised. Did he have a talent for doing business? He was earning the difference in price crazily from the other side and could actually enjoy 10% of the profit from this side? Did it not mean that he could earn both ends without any capital? This deal was really worth it. He had come with clean sleeves and left with a golden wind. How can I accept this? Yun Yang chuckled and rubbed his hands together. I wonder, when will this 10% of profit come to my account? Young Master Ma had thought that this fellow would be embarrassed and was about to spend a great deal of effort to persuade Yun Yang to accept this 10% of profit. He did not expect the other party to be so straightforward and ask for money after a few insincere pleasantries. This person was really, too honest. It was rare to see one live long enough. He did not even refuse the least bit. Both of them were chatting happily, calculating how much they could earn from this deal. Young Master Ma thought, I'm so happy, so happy. I've recovered all my previous losses. I think I can earn another 20 million. Ha ha ha, 20 million in half a year, how delightful is this? Money is rolling in. This is only the first batch, there will be more orders coming in. Our family is really going to become Yutong's top tavern. We're rich. We're rich. Yun Yang thought, I'm so happy, so happy. I was just worrying about the lack of money and such a large sum of money has come knocking on my door. I can earn 1,000 taels for one pot of wine, 200,000 pots, I can earn 200 million. Oh my God. Plus the bonus that young Master Ma's family gave me. 200 million with a flip of my hand without investing a single penny, a completely free trade? This was not just a free profit, it was 100 million profit without any capital. I'm rich. I'm rich. I'm rich. Actually, I'm not that greedy. It seems like such things don't really need to happen too often, just 3 to 5 times a year. Young Master Ma left, swaying in his excitement. The overjoyed young Master Ma insisted on inviting Yun Yang for a drink, but Yun Yang rejected him firmly this time. What a joke, I'm a man who can earn hundreds of millions every minute now. Drinking with a popinjay like you? Not only is it too degrading, it's also a waste of the opportunity to earn money. In front of the towering wind pavilion, Yun Yang, who was disguised as the towering wind pavilion master, stood with his arms behind his back. Shui Wuyin, you should appear now. I've been looking for you all this time and I know that you've been looking for me as well. I can't find you, but it's even more impossible for you to find me. Now, I've placed myself right under your nose. Are you coming or not? Yun Yang, who was disguised as the towering wind pavilion master, stood in front of the towering wind pavilion for a while, as if admiring the scenery. Then, he opened the tightly shut door with a mystical gust of wind and walked in. He did not meet anyone along the way, his empty footsteps echoing continuously. Yun Yang went straight to the top floor, where there was a chair. This was where the towering Wind Pavilion Master usually rested. Yun Yang had investigated many times in the past. Whenever the towering Wind Pavilion Master had time, he would sit here and look into the distance. Sitting here and looking out, Yun Yang realized that there was a peculiar gap among the rows of houses. Looking through this gap, he could see the residence of 9 Supremes. Yun Yang sat there, staring at the residence of 9 Supremes in the distance for a long time. Suddenly, he felt a surge of warmth in his heart. He just looked at it. He just waited. He did not plan to wait too long. The time he had reserved for himself was only until the 3rd watch of the night. The time given to Shui Wuyin was also only until the 3rd watch of the night. If Shui Wuyin still did not arrive at the 3rd watch of the night, Yun Yang would leave without hesitation and never come to the towering Wind Pavilion again. This was a test. A test for Shui Wuyin from Yun Yang. He believed that Shui Wuyin had already confirmed that he was not 8th Brother Supreme Wind, which meant that he was not the real towering Wind Pavilion Master. Furthermore, he was an impostor, a fake impersonating the real towering Cloud Pavilion Master. If Shui Wuyin still came, he would definitely face great danger. However, if he really came, it would prove that this person was loyal to 8th Brother. Since 8th Brother trusted him so much when he was alive, Yun Yang could trust him too. However, if Shui Wuyin did not come, it meant that he did not dare. No matter how loyal he had been in the past, Yun Yang did not need a person who was afraid of death. If he came, he would be one of us. If he did not come, we would be strangers. From now on, I would not care, nor would I trust. The towering Wind Pavilion would never be the same again. After yesterday's outburst, I went to sleep. I woke up at midnight and wrote until 3:30 to finish this morning's chapter. Then, I woke up for a while at noon to update the chapter. In the afternoon, I passed out and slept until night time. My brain is a mess. I've finally finished writing the 2nd chapter. I'm very sorry for updating so late. Feng Ling Tian, you're not a young man anymore, you can't work so hard anymore. Chapter 186. Yun Yang sat in silence. He did not have to wait too long. Just after midnight, footsteps could be heard coming from the stairs. Only one person had come. The person's footsteps were steady but unusually determined. Only when he came to the door did he hesitate for a moment, but he walked in resolutely without any hesitation. The corners of Yun Yang's lips curled into a comforting and appreciative smile. The hesitation at the door was human nature. Even if one was an unparalleled hero, even if he had long decided to disregard life and death, he would still hesitate when faced with such a situation. Taking a step forward might lead to death, but taking a step back was a whole new world. A person who could take a step forward after hesitating was at least a person who was unafraid of death, a person who would not turn back if there was a sense of righteousness. How could he not admire such a person? At the same time, Yun Yang was comforted that his 8th brother had such a subordinate. In contrast, if Shui Wuyin had stepped in without hesitation, Yun Yang's evaluation of him would not have been as high. There would only be 2 possibilities then. One would be the bravery of an ordinary man, while the other would be someone who had a well-thought-out plan and had ulterior motives. Yun Yang did not like either of these people. The approaching footsteps suddenly stopped. They were already at the door. Stop. The door was wide open. Yun Yang could even imagine the person at the door looking at him when he stopped. He still did not turn his head, still sitting there and looking outside. He stared at the ray of light, the residence of 9 Supremes that was shrouded by the night fog in the distance. Even though it was blurry, the residence of 9 Supremes was there. You're here. Shui Wuyin stood at the door, his voice dry. Looking at the figure in the shadows that looked extremely familiar, yet extremely unfamiliar, he felt a sudden urge to tremble in his heart. "You're here too?" Yun-yang said faintly, "Where have you been all this time?" "I've been looking for you." Shui Wuyin trembled, his voice hoarse as if his vocal cords were about to break. "Looking for me? I've been looking for you all this time too." Yun-yang heaved a soft sigh of relief and said, "Since you came tonight, you must have made the necessary arrangements." Shui Wuyin's strange voice was still like two pieces of sandpaper rubbing against each other in the dark night. "That's right, you are the most dangerous person I have ever seen in my life. If I didn't make ample preparations, I wouldn't have dared to come." Yun-yang smiled faintly and turned to face Shui Wuyin with the face that belonged to the towering Wind Pavilion master. Shui Wuyin took a deep breath and said, "Since I'm already here, please take off this face." "Why?" Yun-yang asked. "This is my boss's face, not yours." Shui Wuyin stood at the door, his hoarse voice revealing traces of coldness. "Do you know who your boss is? How do you know this isn't my face?" Yun-yang's clear eyes looked at Shui Wuyin. "Do you know your boss' true colors?" Shui Wuyin said indifferently, "What you said isn't important. The only important thing is that you're not my boss. You're only an imposter." Yun-yang replied, "Impersonation. Have you ever thought that to be able to impersonate your boss and even successfully deceive you for a period of time and manipulate you, it must be someone he knows and trusts to be able to do so?" Shui Wuyin said coldly, "Of course I have thought about it. However, there are only two possible identities for you. First, you're my boss' closest and most trusted person, but because of this layer of relationship, you've caused my boss death and even wanted to take over his property." Yun-yang was dumbfounded. "What about the second?" "The second, you're still my boss' closest and most trusted person. My boss has entrusted you to look after his property. Also, please, impersonate him." Although Shui Wuyin's voice was hoarse and unpleasant to the ears, it was still calm and cold like ice. Yun-yang thought about it seriously and said, "That's right. There are indeed only these two possibilities. Which one do you think I am?" Shui Wuyin said, "I can't think of an answer to this question. Initially, it could only be verified with time. However, since you're here and I'm here today, I might as well make some things clear. The worst possibility is that someone dies here today. Either I die, or you die. Isn't that so?" Yun-yang sighed softly and said, "It's still too early to talk about life and death now. I've always been curious about who you are and what your background is. I know a lot about your boss, but he never told me about your real background. That's why I've always been curious." He said slowly, "Right, your boss told me that he's never seen Shui Wuyin anxious. I believe this because I've never seen you anxious either, except for today. I believe that if your boss was here now and saw how anxious you are for him, he would be very comforted." Shui Wuyin clenched his fists tightly and looked at Yun-yang. "I only want to know who you are now. Everything else is not important." Yun-yang stood up slowly, his body unmoving, but the windows around him were suddenly shut. Shui Wuyin had been standing by the door and had not actually come in, but for some reason, he had moved a step forward involuntarily while the door behind him had closed soundlessly. Shui Wuyin snorted and said, "Do you think that you can change my mind by closing the door?" Yun-yang said faintly, "I only want to tell you the truth, but it's better for us to communicate one-on-one." Shui Wuyin snorted coldly and did not comment further. Yun-yang said, "Your boss is the closest person to me." Shui Wuyin snorted disdainfully, a mocking expression appearing on his face as he said, "I know. I've always known that you're the closest person to boss. But do you know that there are 36 people outside this room with hidden weapons aimed at this place, ready to make a move at any time?" He ignored Yun-yang's words and continued, "Also, I've planted enough explosives under this room to blow up a lake. Other than that, I've also hollowed out a considerable portion of this room's walls and filled them with poison. I believe that the amount of poisonous smoke alone is enough to poison half of Tiantang City's population to death. Shui Wuyin said calmly, so, no matter how high your cultivation base is, even if you're Ling Xiaozui himself, you won't be able to walk out of here if you can't give me a satisfactory answer today. I don't need to give the order for all this. With a single thought, all the killing moves will be executed immediately. Shui Wuyin said faintly, mind control, do you know that? Yunyang replied, mind control? You're actually from the Ling clan? Shui Wuyin snorted and said, speak, who are you? Yunyang smiled faintly. You've told me so much, I have to return the favor no matter what. What I want to tell you now is that I don't doubt what you've said at all. It's a pity that these arrangements are completely useless against me. Shui Wuyin snorted coldly and was about to retort when he saw the silhouette sitting opposite him disappear. What replaced it was a pure white cloud. It floated in the air, coming and going at a leisurely pace. Shui Wuyin's eyes widened at once, his brain going into a blank state. The cloud and the air dispersed into thousands of wisps of fog, covering every inch of the space. Then, it condensed into a ball of fog once again. Yunyang's body materialized in front of Shui Wuyin once more. Looking at Shui Wuyin's shocked gaze, Yunyang smiled warmly. Wuyin, do you recognize me now? The face that Yunyang had revealed now was his original appearance. Young Master Yun. Yunyang? It's you? Shui Wuyin's voice was stuttering but he had instinctively lowered his voice. Yunyang sighed softly. You don't recognize me? Shui Wuyin's eyes flashed with excitement and reverence as he nodded continuously. His face was flushed as he lowered his voice to a whisper, you are Supreme Yun? Yunyang's gaze flickered as his tone turned melancholic as he said faintly, your boss is my eighth brother. Wind. Shui Wuyin was dumbstruck. The boss that he had been loyal to was actually Lord Supreme Wind whom the world's heroes revered? Your boss, my eighth brother, he's already. Yunyang closed his eyes. Your guess is right. He has already entrusted everything to me. That's why I'm pretending to be him. I'm not bad at acting as eighth brother. Other than you, no one else would have noticed. Yunyang's words sounded rather humorous, but both Yunyang and Shui Wuyin were filled with sorrow. Their hearts were filled with sorrow. Shui Wuyin stood there dumbfounded, feeling a loud boom in his mind. Those were countless thunderbolts that formed an earth-shattering bombardment in his mind. Even his soul seemed to have been blasted into pieces, leaving nothing behind. However, Yunyang's voice was still like a nightmare, drilling into his ears continuously. After a long time, do you believe me? Yunyang asked. I. Shui Wuyin's gaze was agonized as he said hoarsely, I do. If I can't even believe the Nine Supremes' words, then there's no one else in this world that I can trust. I hope that you can help me. Yunyang said seriously, help me, avenge me, help me, finish what we haven't finished yet. Shui Wuyin shut his eyes tightly and murmured, is my boss, really, gone? Yunyang turned his head and did not speak for a long time. However, the muscle on the side of his face twitched, it was equivalent to giving Shui Wuyin his answer. I promise you. Chapter 187. Yunyang asked, what request? Shui Wuyin's eyes were filled with deep hatred as he said, when the real culprit is found in the future, I want his head chopped off. I want it personally. Yunyang lifted his head abruptly to look at Shui Wuyin, speechless for a moment. Shui Wuyin gritted his teeth and said, you already know that I'm from the Eldar tribe. I believe you know that we Eldar tribe have a special way of dealing with souls. As long as I chop off the head with my own hands, I can keep torturing the soul until the end of time. Yunyang said softly, all right, I promise you. I also promise here that such a day will come. Shui Wuyin exhaled deeply and said, thank you. Before his words echoed in the air, Shui Wuyin's body contorted as his face contorted in agony. Then, a puff of pink smoke was spat out of his mouth, landing on Yun Yang's palm and disappearing in an instant. The entire process happened so quickly that Yun Yang could not react in time. A single thought of the soul? Yun Yang was shocked. Wuyin, why do you have to do this? Shui Wuyin said weakly and hoarsely, yes, it is a single thought of the soul. From now on, from this moment onwards, my life and death are in your hands. This prohibition can never be removed. Why do you want to do this? Yun Yang asked. Because only then can you trust me completely and allow me to truly participate in all your actions. Shui Wuyin's hoarse voice was unusually determined. This is the first time we've met, our interaction is too shallow. I don't wish to have a run-in process, I want to take action immediately. I've never believed in using a suspicious person. I need your complete trust. I can trust the renowned Nine Supremes unconditionally, but Lord Supreme Cloud is in danger at every step. What right do you have to trust me? Therefore, only a single thought of the soul can skip the run-in process and achieve the utmost trust. Only when you trust me unreservedly can I have the chance to avenge my boss with my own hands. Shui Wuyin said hoarsely, I know that someone who can kill my boss and the Nine Supremes must be an enmity that I can't even imagine. However, from now on, I, Shui Wuyin, only have this one goal in my life. To achieve this goal, I can do anything, no matter the cost, no matter the means. Yun Yang was moved. These were the subordinates of Eighth Brother. He looked at Shui Wuyin for a while and said, Wuyin, call me young master from now on. Yes, young master. Shui Wuyin said, I understand. A wise smile appeared on his face. He knew that from this moment on, Yun Yang had truly begun to trust him. The thought of his soul was worth it. Boss, I must avenge you. Definitely. Wuyin, you've got guts. Yun Yang joked, you're alone and you dare to come and scare me. Shui Wuyin smiled embarrassedly. But I didn't manage to hide it from you, young master. Yun Yang smiled. Honestly speaking, I believe that most people in this world will be fooled by you, other than me. Even those legendary experts might not be an exception. Shui Wuyin said indifferently, maybe it's because I was born this way. I won't blush when I lie. Even I believe the lies I tell. This is probably the same as deceiving yourself first. Only when you deceive yourself can you deceive the person you want to deceive. Yun Yang was stunned for a moment. I'm impressed by this. Shui Wuyin's scare tactic just now had no substance at all. There was no ambush, no manpower on standby, no explosives set up. As for the large amount of poisonous smoke that could poison half of Tiantong's citizens to death, it was even more ridiculous. There was nothing at all. This was a complete empty fort stratagem. It was hard for Shui Wuyin to be able to play the empty fort stratagem so vividly, as if it was true. If Yun Yang had not separated himself from the fog to check and ascertain the truth, he would most probably have been deceived. However, from the analysis of their conversation, everything was true. At least, Shui Wuyin believed that it was true. If he had not checked it out, why would Yun Yang not believe it? Young master hasn't shown up for so many days since we parted ways. There must be something important for you to suddenly appear tonight, Shui Wuyin said. That's right. Tomorrow or the day after, our towering wind pavilion will have a large number of fat sheep. Yun Yang raised his eyebrows and said, what I need is your full cooperation. You must make these fellows lose even their pants here. Of course, that's not a problem. Shui Wuyin answered expressionlessly. Such a matter was a piece of cake to him. This is not difficult for you. What I want you to pay attention to are a few people among them. Pay attention to them. Yun Yang named a few people and said, regarding Tianxian Cliff, I don't believe that the high-ranking generals of the four empires are completely unaware of it. However, this requires further observation and analysis. If we accidentally find the wrong person, we'll definitely alert the enemy and trigger a counterattack. To achieve something, other than a strong mind and ability, one must also have a clear and objective mind at all times. Yun Yang said, Eighth brother has always said that your mind is good. Now I know that you're actually from the Ling clan. This job is even more suitable for you than for me. Shui Wuyin said calmly, I understand. As long as there is such a person among these people, I will try my best to find him in the shortest time possible. Yun Yang exhaled softly. It was only now that he felt slightly more at ease. Shui Wuyin was definitely an invaluable help. This person was even calmer and more sober than Yun Yang most of the time because Yun Yang still had the burden of his family and country. He might be impulsive and hot-blooded at any moment. However, to Shui Wuyin, there would never be such a situation. He's like a cold-blooded fellow, never having a moment where his blood would boil. His mind is so meticulous that it's almost comparable to Ol Ninth's. Besides, everything he does is viewed from the most objective perspective. This person has no emotions, no impulsiveness or hot-bloodedness. If he were an assassin, he would definitely be top-notch in the world. If he were a strategist, he would definitely calculate everything in the world. If he were a commander, he would definitely take every possibility into account. This was Eighth Brother Supreme Wind's evaluation of Shui Wuyin, and it was an incredibly high evaluation. Actually, there are times when I really want to recruit him into the Nine Heavens dictum. However, his bloodline and his identity as a Ling clan member will never be acknowledged by the Nine Heavens dictum. Supreme Wind's evaluation was straight to the point. However, Yun Yang was surprised to see the other side of the cold-blooded fellow Supreme Wind had mentioned today. Upon hearing that the Towering Wind Pavilion's master was Supreme Wind and that Supreme Wind had already sacrificed himself, Shui Wuyin, who had never been emotional, was so agitated. It was an agitation that was close to breaking down. Eighth brother, don't worry. I'll take good care of your brother for you. As long as the conditions allow it, I'll help him fulfill his wish and your wish too, to cure his throat. Yun Yang walked out of the Towering Wind Pavilion slowly. In the east, the light of dawn was already peeking out. The next day, Yun Yang came to the Tower to Heaven in early in the morning. Does everyone have any specific travel plans today? Why don't we look for a few restaurants to listen to music? Or perhaps a casino to play? Yun Yang's words caused the dark-skinned youth beside Han Sanhe to roll his eyes at him. Yun Yang faced it with composure, even making a funny face at the fellow. You don't like me? I'll make it so that you have no choice but to look. I'll piss you off. Today is the first day. No matter how important it is, we have to put it aside. Han Sanhe said seriously, today, we're going to the residence of 9 Supremes to take a look. Han Sanhe's eyes were trained on Yun Yang's face. Yun Yang frowned and said, everyone, you don't have much time left. Why do you still want to go to the residence of 9 Supremes? That's Yutong's hero, our guardian angel. What's there to see about the grudge between them? Besides, the residence of 9 Supremes is shrouded in fog all year round, nothing can be seen. Don't tell me you all want to decipher the 9 Heavens domain? The depth of Yun Yang's eyes revealed a cold, sharp sense of wariness. An old marshal sighed and said, the residence of 9 Supremes is a wonder of the world. The 9 Supremes lords are even more awe-inspiring. Paying homage to the 9 Supremes is one of the main purposes of our visit. Even though we are enemies, we still admire the 9 Supremes Lord's majesty and loyalty. We must go to the residence of 9 Supremes. Han Sanhe studied the faint wariness and suspicion in Yun Yang's eyes. A sliver of disappointment finally flashed across his eyes as he said, "The Nine Heavens domain isn't something that can be broken by humans. Even if we want to, we can't do anything about it. Why would we look for trouble? You don't have to worry about this." Yun Yang shook his head. "I'm sorry. You can say whatever you want. I need to ask for instructions regarding this matter. I can't make the decision alone." Everyone nodded in understanding. Yun Yang mounted his horse and sped off, heading straight for the residence of Marshal. Han Sanhe and the other generals exchanged glances and smiled. This fellow really has to ask for Qiu Jianhan's permission for everything. However, does that old fellow Qiu Jianhan really think that we're all fools? You can't even see this? Not long after, Yun Yang galloped his horse over, his face brimming with excitement and enthusiasm as he said loudly, "I almost forgot, I can still make the decision on this matter. I've turned back halfway. All of you can prepare to depart now." The crowd pouted. King trust you so much, of course. Old Marshal Qiu Jianhan, the leader of Yutong's three rogues, did not know that he had been made a scapegoat once again. In the future, there would definitely be more scapegoats. He would have to continue carrying the blame. He would carry the blame until these fellows left Yutong, and then he would have to carry the new scapegoat. He truly deserved to be called a scapegoat. Chapter 188. A certain old Marshal Black, the Black Pot of Blame, was sighing in the palace. Who would have thought that these fellows didn't leave immediately after Tai Zheng's wedding? Instead, they stayed. What do they want? Their motives are not simple, they must have ulterior motives. Qiu Jianhan was like an enraged lion, pacing in his cage, baring his fangs and claws, ready to devour someone. Isn't this already within our calculations? His Majesty looked at Qiu Jianhan with a chuckle. It's not easy for them to come. Perhaps this is their only chance to enter Yutong's capital. How can they go back empty-handed? These people have yet to give up on Yutong. They'll definitely do something. Most likely, they're looking for spies and informants. At the very least, they'll be stealing information. Old Marshal Qiu looked indignant. Let them be. His Majesty was very open-minded. Yutong is riddled with holes now. Their spies are all over Yutong. What information is there that they don't know? Let them be. How much more damage can they cause? I, on the other hand, hope that after staying here for a long time, if they really don't want to go back, they can settle down here and live in peace. That would be a good thing. His Majesty's magnanimity left the old Marshal dumbfounded. I have to say, Your Majesty's thinking is too beautiful. Even I wouldn't dare to have such extravagant hopes. Just how big of a hole in the brain is this? His Majesty laughed. All in all, let them be. However, they didn't mention anyone else but Yun Yang's company. I can't help but wonder where Yun Yang will bring these generals to. Speaking of this, the old marshal was tempted to laugh. I heard that the brat suggested booking a brothel for them and let everyone have 10 days of pleasure. Brothel, 10 days of pleasure. His Majesty's eyes widened as he coughed. Cough, cough, cough. Ha ha ha. F***ck. This brat's way of conducting himself, ha ha ha. Truly delights this emperor. For a moment, His Majesty was convulsing with laughter. Suddenly, he realized that Qiu Jianhan was glaring at him, reminding him of how inappropriate his words had been. As the emperor of a nation, he had actually cursed. This was too damaging to the image of a ruler. He hurriedly tried to salvage the situation. I was really surprised. I couldn't help but want to curse a few times. I just wanted to vent my frustrations. Puff. It would have been better if His Majesty had not explained himself. Once he did, Qiu Jianhan could no longer hold himself back as he chortled, Your Majesty, these 3 words are exactly what this old official is thinking. Every time this old official thinks of Han Sanhe visiting a brothel, I want to laugh out loud. I really wish that Yun Yang could be more capable and let old man Han go for 10 days. Qiu Jianhan said with a gloating expression. However, the expectations of the old marshal and the emperor would be disappointed today. Yun Yang had already led a group of people towards the residence of 9 supremes. Along the way, first young Master Yun displayed his eloquence and continuously introduced the scenery along the way. He spoke with confidence and composure as if he was familiar with his family's treasures, even if the way he introduced was different from the rest. Do you see this house? This house had a long history. Back then, when Emperor Taizu founded the country, this was the place where the mistress of the Prime Minister's father-in-law's brother-in-law's 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 sister-in-law lived. Why was it so famous? It's because the brother-in-law of the Prime Minister's brother-in-law. After listening to such a complicated introduction, Zhang Gu could no longer keep his cool. He said angrily, wasn't the brother-in-law of the Prime Minister's brother-in-law the Prime Minister back then? The Prime Minister's brother-in-law's sister-in-law, wasn't that the Prime Minister's sister-in-law? It's such a simple relationship, yet you beat around the bush, sister-in-law's lover. Yun Yang, the culprit, was actually confused by Zhang Ji's retelling. He blinked and said, "Cough, this is a little complicated." Your memory is really good. Everyone looked at him with disdain. Look over there. Do you see this tree? Look at how intertwined its roots are and how huge its crown is. This tree's history must be even more profound. Legend has it that this tree was once a tree spirit that had attained enlightenment. It blesses the weather, the country's prosperity, and the people's safety. It has the ability to summon the wind and rain, to move mountains and seas. But do you know how many times this tree has been struck by lightning in these 100 years? Yun Yang wore a mysterious expression. How many times? The dark-faced youth wanted to ignore him, but he could not help asking. Not even once. Yun Yang said seriously. The dark-faced youth glared at him as if he wanted to devour someone. Such a huge tree, yet it hasn't been struck by lightning even once after so many years. Yun Yang said, this itself is a very surprising thing. A bearded general retorted in dissatisfaction, this tree is at most as thick as the mouth of a bull. It'd be an exaggeration to say that it's 10 years old. How could it have gone through hundreds of years of wind and rain? Besides, even a 100-year-old tree can't be considered an ancient tree. What are you trying to do by rambling on like this, child? Yun Yang purposely lowered his voice and said, look, it's that person at the end of the street. He looks perverted and left immediately when he saw us. His actions are extremely suspicious. Is that the assassin sent by the Empire of Dongxian? Are you trying to create a conflict? We have to consider everyone's safety. There's no room for error. If anything were to happen to all of you in the Empire of Yutang, it would be a huge matter that would affect the diplomatic relations between the two empires. The generals were exasperated. This bastard cursed them viciously. Any ordinary person who saw so many big shots walking together would definitely run away as soon as possible. How did they become assassins in your words? You're even talking about us being beheaded? You've said that we don't have much time left and we have to go on our way, but we've tolerated it all. Look at you, you're obviously addicted to playing around. You're the one who's beheaded. You're the one who's beheaded. You're the one who doesn't have much time left. You should be on your way now. Some of the hot-tempered generals had already begun cursing. You're cursing me. You're actually cursing me. Yun Yang was enraged. I'm kind enough to be your guide, taking care of everything, no matter how big or small. I've done my best and only hope to be friendly with my neighbors. I didn't expect you to actually curse me. Do you have any conscience? Do you have any self-awareness as guests? Do you have any? The generals were exasperated. Curse you? Who was the one who cursed who first? A few of the hot-tempered ones wanted to rush forward to reason with him. You're cursing me. I'm not bringing you to the brothel tonight. Let me tell you the truth. There's no way to go to the brothel if you want to. I won't suffocate you to death. Not only am I not bringing you to the brothel, I'm going to put aphrodisiac in your meals. I'm going to ask a few girls to dance with me after putting aphrodisiac. I won't let you touch them. How dare you curse me? You'll have to bear the consequences if you dare to curse me. The consequences will be very, 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 very serious. I won't go even if I'm beaten to death. Play with each other in your rooms. Your chrysanthemum is ruined, and your face is full of wounds. How dare you curse me? Is there any logic, justice, or justice left? How dare you, treating your father's kindness as malice? This young master's passion is to find you a brothel out of goodwill. It's fine if you don't want to repay me, but you're actually cursing me. Yun Yang was eloquent. For every sentence that someone said, he had already replied with at least 3 sentences. He was a great talker. He kept saying brothel and suffocate you to death, making these authoritative generals sound like they had been single for years and had never seen a woman in their entire lives. For a moment, the road was filled with curses as everyone fired at each other. The generals were infuriated. We King came all the way here just to visit a brothel in Yutang? This bastard's words could infuriate the dead to the point that they would jump in their coffins. The passers-by cast sidelong glances at this group of well-dressed men who were obviously bigwigs spewing vulgarities. They kept saying brothel, prostitutes, aphrodisiac, and chrysanthemum. It was unbearable. The moral degeneration of the world was getting worse by the day, and the hearts of the people were no longer what they used to be. Yun Yang did not back down in the face of the scolding. He battled the generals verbally, scolding whoever he caught. For those he could not win, he said, I'm not bringing you to the brothel anymore. I'll suffocate you to death. I'll let you play with yourselves. Crippled your chrysanthemums, bruised your bodies. The words were a stroke of genius, angering the generals so much that their veins were popping and their heads were spinning. Towards the end, Yun Yang had even escalated into a barrage. What's wrong with all of you? All of you look like you want to eat me up. Could it be that the officials and generals of your countries only think about women? Do all of you have other pursuits other than women? Can't you solve them yourselves? Even if you can't do it, you can ask someone to help you. No wonder all of you fight us every year. Deep down, it's because Yutang's ladies are beautiful, isn't it? Look at all of you, you can't even find a wife in your own country, can you? Otherwise, why would you rush over when you heard that Iron Marshal is marrying a wife? So it's to satisfy your cravings. Are you envious, jealous, and hateful of our Iron Marshal now? I've really seen the true colors of all of you now. You're the continent's famed generals, you're the continent's famed generals indeed. Those who passed by in a hurry and overheard the conversation were filled with waves of anger. How could these fellows have such thoughts? Humph! As the crowd filled in the blanks, all the foreign generals became lechers who had been repressed for more than a decade. They were the kind who were unrestrained and could do anything. How filthy! Chapter 189. While Yun Yang was still hurling insults, a gust of wind had begun to blow in Tiantang City. Did you know? I heard young Master Yun cursing just now. These fellows want young Master Yun to bring them to the brothel when they come. What a bunch of lechers, and they're all generals. What the hell are they? Which country are they from? What a strange way to put it. Of course it's Dongxian, Dayuan, Tianzi. No wonder they come to us for war every year. Snatching women, we can't let them succeed no matter what. Once they come here, our families, F***ck. Your father shall enlist in the army and kill these bastards. Those with money, those with power, those with manpower. We can't let these lechers come here. Young Master Yun has said that they can do anything. It's not easy for young Master Yun to argue with so many people and refuse to bring them to the brothel no matter what. Those people are forcing young Master Yun. Young Master Yun must be feeling bitter. Young Master Yun, it's really not easy. Young Master Yun is righteous and benevolent. What he has done is commendable. Even if it's a brothel, it belongs to Yutong. How can we let these foreigners go as they please? No way. Young Master Yun's loyal heart protects the prostitute. He is righteous, open and aboveboard, chivalrous, courageous and courageous. You're absolutely right. They watched as Yun Yang fought with increasing vigor, spittle flying everywhere as he exchanged insults with the generals. His words were as sharp as a knife, infuriating the generals so much that their mouths were contorted and their eyes were slanted. They were tongue-tied, unable to defend themselves. This was clearly a huge slander. Any one of us is a great general of a country, and we have fought in the East and the West. We are invincible and have made outstanding contributions. How did we become a group of perverts in this bastard's mouth? Han Sanhe held his forehead with one hand, truly troubled by the situation. How could this bastard be so unruly? He had actually thrown such a tantrum at a time like this without a care for his dignity. He had even dared to say anything. This was too martial. The dark-skinned youth beside him came over and said in a low voice, "He's inciting the people." Han Sanhe was shocked when he heard the words. He turned his head and looked around. Everywhere he looked, there were people who came to listen to a few words, then turned around and left. The crowd came and went, and it was unknown how many people had already heard the quarrel here, but after they rejoined the sea of people, there were people everywhere. One could imagine what kind of storm these people would stir up. The scariest thing was that today's incident was not intentional, nor was it intentional. It was just spread by word of mouth among the commoners, and this kind of transmission efficiency was the scariest. Stop arguing, all of you. Han Sanhe hollered, "What a disgrace." Actually, Han Sanhe had said something similar a few times before, but the effect was limited. Even if someone wanted to listen, they would be dragged back into the fray by Yun Yang's words. However, Han Sanhe's tone this time was unprecedentedly stern, shocking everyone present. The war of words came to an abrupt end. Young Master Yun, let's just go to the residence of 9 Supremes. Let's not talk about anything else for now. Han Sanhe looked at Yun Yang and said slowly, enunciating each word, especially the scenery along the way. We have no interest in watching it anymore. Yun Yang knew that this was the limit of Han Sanhe's patience. Going too far was as bad as not going far enough. There would be another opportunity later, so there was no need to be impatient. He nodded and said readily, "That's right, Marshal Han is right. Look at all of you talking about brothels and brothels. What is this? It's Marshal Han who never mentions brothels on the surface, but people go there secretly." All the generals were furious. Who was the one who talked about brothels and brothels? Under Han Sanhe's threatening gaze, however, no one dared to say anything. In their hearts, however, they had already hacked Yun Yang to death 1,000,000 times over. This bastard, don't let him fall into my hands in the future. If he does, your father will *ck him to death. The group continued on their journey. Han Sanhe sighed inwardly. Although he was the chief military officer, he was not a politician. If he was, he would have noticed Yun Yang's intention immediately and stopped him. This kid's brain was really too flexible. However, if the quarrel today were to be spread out by Yutong's people, it would definitely cause a commotion. When word of mouth spread, the empire of Yutong's xenophobic heart would be unprecedentedly firm and unshakable. Some people could not care less about the country, the rise and fall of glory, but as long as they were human, who would not care about their parents, wives, daughters, and children? If the saying that all the generals of each country were lechers was spread, there would be countless witnesses that even the highest-ranking general went to a brothel the first thing he did when he came to Yutong. The reputations of the various countries were completely ruined just like that. Not a single drop was left untouched. Once the war broke out, the empire of Yutong would be united, and all its citizens would be soldiers. It would be a light punishment for them to rather die than surrender. Even if there was a day of defeat and the city being conquered, the only thing they would see in the end would be dead people. Han Sanhe knew that Yun Yang's act must have been premeditated even though it seemed like a coincidence. He might even have a backup plan. His ultimate goal was to use these people to stir up the empire of Yutong's people's desire to defend against the foreign enemy, achieving the goal that he had just thought of. Inciting them was not the most effective method. The most brilliant method was to make the entire country hate the foreign invaders so much that they would rather die than surrender and would rather die than be humiliated. By then, whether one was literate or not, the backbone of a country, the soul of a people, would be formed naturally. This was the fundamental way of life. Young Master Yun is indeed far-sighted and wise. Han Sanhe looked at Yun Yang, his gaze deep as they walked. His gaze was inquisitive and a little vexed. Why had he chosen such a fellow to accompany him? His feeling about this fellow was right, he was indeed a dangerous fellow, but this was too dangerous. You flatter me. Old Marshal is flattering me. Yun Yang has only spoken the truth. How can he be far-sighted? Yun Yang wore a smug look. Justice is in the hearts of men, right and wrong can't be argued. The reason is on my side, of course, you people can't argue with me. Today is truly satisfying. Looking at Yun Yang's pretense of superficiality, the wariness in Han Sanhe's eyes deepened. Along the way, there were already a lot of people who were looking at the troop with strange gazes. Some of them even spat on the ground angrily after the large group of people passed by. Pa! The residence of 9 Supremes. When the group saw their destination from afar, the residence of 9 Supremes, shrouded in a thick cloud of fog, the expressions of the 200 people turned grim. The legendary residence of 9 Supremes stood quietly on the other side, exuding an intimidating aura that made everyone who saw it shudder, not daring to act rashly. The rustling sound of sweeping the floor rang softly and rhythmically. The 200 generals turned towards the source of the sound and saw many soldiers in old military uniforms around the residence of 9 Supremes, each of them holding large brooms with long handles, sweeping meticulously. Their bodies were hunched, the large brooms laid flat on the ground, dragging the dust on the ground forcefully, but not a single speck of dust was stirred up. The ground was spotless. Even if one were to roll around in their snow-white clothes, they would not be stained by anything at all. There were 2 small patches of trees on the side, each tree was tall and straight, the branches that stuck out halfway were trimmed cleanly. The dust that was swept from the ground was gathered and dumped around the roots of the trees. The faces of the soldiers who gathered here were calm and serene. It was as if being able to do this kind of work was their lifelong pursuit. Han Sanhe sighed softly. Are these the remnants of the army? Han Sanhe looked at the men in old military uniforms who were either missing an arm or an eye. However, every single one of these disabled soldiers had tidied themselves up neatly and cleanly. Even their hair was neatly arranged. The residence of 9 Supremes was very clean before the 9 Supremes lords met with mishap. However, it wasn't as clean as it is now. Yun Yang said quietly, ever since the news of the 9 Supremes lords' mishap came back, this place has become Yutong's holy land. No one or force has ever called for it, no one has ever purposely arranged it, not even once. All the cleaning work here is done spontaneously by these veterans, automatically arranging themselves to maintain everything here. There's no salary or remuneration, everything is done on their own accord. To them, their greatest wish is for the 9 Supremes lords to return. They're afraid that the 9 Supremes Lords will be in a bad mood when they return to see the mess. They won't allow the Holy Land in their hearts to be tainted by any trash. Over time, it has become what it is now. Yun Yang's tone was solemn as he introduced, each of these people are good men who have slaughtered countless enemies in the battlefield. The residence of 9 Supremes is guarded by loyal souls, guarded by loyal hearts. The generals of various countries wore solemn expressions as they listened, watching the residence of 9 Supremes respectfully. After a while, they bowed in unison, unusually solemn. Mighty Yutong, mighty 9 Supremes, warring the world, protecting the nation and its people, victorious in every battle, revered in the battlefield, you are the army's morale on all 4 sides of the battlefield, you are the army's soul among the millions of warriors. Chapter 190. Another veteran general from the Empire of Dayuan sighed softly and said, the 9 Supremes are indeed the legends of a generation. The battles fought by these 9 people. I'm afraid any one of us can't fight as many battles in 3 lifetimes. No wonder Yutong calls them the guardians of the empire. They are undefeatable and undefeated. This old man is convinced by the title of legend. I have no choice but to be convinced. All the generals nodded in silence. What he said was true. No matter how reluctant they were, they had to admit it. The battles on all 4 sides of the battlefield were endless, especially after the legend of the 9 Supremes had appeared. Yutong had become the world's public enemy, and since then, Yutong had been in a precarious situation. Whenever Yutong was in danger, the 9 Supremes would almost always come to their aid. Some of the 9 Supremes had even joined the battle at the same time. Even when the battle here had just ended, another request for help had arrived and they would be thrown into a new round of battle immediately. If they had not participated in it personally, no one would know how these 9 people had done it. In spite of this, most of the generals present had led their troops to fight against the 9 Supremes. Even with the most conservative calculation, 1 battle per person, there had been 200 battles in total. Some of them had fought the 9 Supremes more than once. However, this figure alone had already surpassed the so-called battle-hardened generals by a few times. There were also those generals who had not come and those who had been killed by the 9 Supremes. There were also the battles against the grasslands and the southern border. If one were to really count the battles that the 9 Supremes had participated in, even these generals who were renowned throughout the continent and boasted of being battle-hardened were left speechless, sighing at their own inferiority. Now that they had seen the legendary residence of 9 Supremes with their own eyes, it was as if they had seen the 9 masked men in black who were like gods and demons on the battlefield. The 9 different masks, when they had appeared alone, their actual combat ability might not have been impressive. It could even be said to be weak and not enough to be a threat. However, the manifestation power of the 9 of them was impossible to guard against. In a battle, as long as any 2 of the 9 Supremes worked together and cooperated with each other, they could change the course of the battle. It was undoubtedly an ability that would strike fear and despair into any enemy. Now, these 9 people had finally disappeared. When the generals from various countries had confirmed this fact, they were relieved, but at the same time, they felt a boundless sense of regret. Han Sanhe walked forward slowly. There was a clear line in front of the residence of 9 Supremes, 9 steps away from the entrance. The distance was not considered far, enough for everyone to see the residence of 9 Supremes clearly from this distance. However, this line was also the dividing line that forbade anyone from approaching. Ever since the news of the 9 Supremes' demise had spread, no one dared to cross this line. Han Sanhe took a few steps forward, already very close to the dividing line. At this moment, Han Sanhe suddenly felt as if countless pairs of eyes were watching him coldly. Facing such an unfriendly gaze, Han Sanhe followed the source of the stare and saw that the soldiers who were cleaning around him had stopped what they were doing and straightened their backs, glaring at him menacingly. The gazes of these people were like the black feathered arrows that had already been shot, soul-stirring and soul-snatching. Han Sanha's heart raced as he stopped before the dividing line in front of the residence of 9 Supremes. The other generals also stopped at this place. However, his gaze became even more complicated. All of them had a feeling that if they were to go a little further and touch the dividing line, something extremely terrifying would happen. It was hard to say how capable the other party was or how much of a threat it could be, but the deterrence that the other party had formed was already intimidating enough that no one dared act rashly. It was not that no one dared act rashly. The youth dressed in black behind Han Sanha did not stop like Han Sanha and the others, but was about to take a step forward instead. Han Sanha extended his arm and said with a faint smile, "Being able to see the residence of 9 Supremes today is the fulfillment of this old man's wish for the past few years. As expected of the legendary residence of 9 Supremes, it's truly a blessing from heaven and earth. I'm satisfied to see such a magnificent sight, I have nothing else to ask for." With this stretch of his hand, he intentionally or unintentionally blocked the black-clothed youth who was about to move forward. However, a scrawny man dressed in black who had been standing behind the empire of Dayuan's old marshal stood up and said faintly, "It's still a great regret that we didn't manage to enter the residence of 9 Supremes after all." "Oh?" asked Han Sanha. The man in black was scrawny and his face was dry like the skin of a dried eggplant. His eyes were cold and sunken deep into his eye sockets, exuding an indescribable sense of eeriness. Based on his appearance, he was most likely not from the military. Yun Yang could confirm with a single glance that a military man would never have such an aura. Han Sanha and the other old marshals might not be able to stop this fellow, he might even make a move. Yun Yang's gaze turned cold, but a smirk hung at the corners of his lips. He wanted to see what this fellow was going to do. No matter what cultivation base you have, even if you're a grandmaster in your bones, you'll enter the residence of 9 Supremes standing and lie inside if you dare to do anything to the residence of 9 Supremes in front of me today. Today's trip won't be repeated. Let this lowly one enter this so-called residence of 9 Supremes on behalf of all the generals." A cold smirk hung on the scrawny man's face as he said faintly, "Let's see if this world-renowned residence of 9 Supremes still possesses the ability to intimidate the world after losing its 9 masters." Yun Yang wore a furious expression as he shouted, "What do you want to do? The residence of 9 Supremes is a sacred place. How can it be trespassed so easily? How dare that thief act so rashly?" Before his words echoed in the air, Yun Yang looked like he was about to rush over to stop the man, but a few generals came forward to stop him. "Young master, please don't be angry. We're already here. If we can't see the rumored impregnable residence of 9 Supremes with our own eyes, it'll be a lifetime regret. Let us verify it, what's the harm?" The old soldiers who were sweeping the floor came over with a smirk, but no one came forward to stop them. Instead, they looked at the people in front of them with their arms folded. One of them said coldly, "We won't stop you if you want to trespass the residence of 9 Supremes, but let me warn you first. Don't blame us for not warning you if you die inside. Trespassing the residence of 9 Supremes will only result in death and a graveless death. You can't complain." The scrawny man's expression changed slightly before he snorted coldly. Suddenly, his body swayed. Then, an extremely strange thing happened. It happened in front of everyone's eyes. Next to the man in black, a silhouette appeared out of thin air with a swoosh. The silhouette's attire, appearance, and aura were exactly the same as the man himself. As the man in black swayed 6 times, another 6 silhouettes that looked exactly like him appeared. These 7 silhouettes stood side by side in front of the residence of 9 Supremes like septuplets. Yun Yang's gaze flickered. Shadow cloning? Could this fellow be from the Spectre sect? He had to admit that it was a good idea. The so-called shadow doppelganger secret technique was a secret technique of the spirit sect. Practitioners who cultivated this technique would be able to create many doppelgangers as their cultivation progressed. Each doppelganger could be illusory or real, possessing the strength of the main body. More importantly, the main body would be able to see everything that the doppelganger saw at the same time. Even if this cultivation method only had such an effect, it was already a rare peerless cultivation method in the world. However, this cultivation method had an even more heaven-defying effect. That was, if the main body in the doppelganger met an enemy, even if the main body had perished, as long as there was one surviving doppelganger, it could recover within a certain period of time. Furthermore, there would be no fundamental damage. It was truly powerful and mysterious. The man in black obviously knew about the Residence of Nine Supreme's reputation and was already prepared to sacrifice his clone once he realized that something was amiss. However, by using this skill, logically speaking, there was indeed a very high chance that he could see what was inside the Residence of Nine Supremes. The icy glint in Yun Yang's eyes flickered for a moment before returning to calmness as he watched the man in black's subsequent actions. A silhouette flashed and a clone of the man in black charged into the thick fog of the Residence of Nine Supremes. Seeing that the clone had successfully entered the Residence of Nine Supremes territory, the Residence of Nine Supremes did not dare to move. The fog shrouding the Residence of Nine Supremes was still as thick as ever, without any ripples. The silhouette that entered was like a clay ox entering the sea, without a trace. The man was baffled. He could clearly feel that his clone was already inside the Residence of Nine Supremes, but he could not see anything. This kind of invisibility was different from the pure darkness where one could not even see their own fingers. All that could be seen was a thick fog. However, he did not feel any impending danger. After drifting around for a while, he did not encounter anything substantial. This was rather strange. The Residence of Nine Supremes was right in front of him. His clone had been dashing around in such a huge building for a long time, but he could not even touch a single wall. He was even running in a single direction without any hindrance, yet there was no end to it either. It was truly strange. A moment later, however, the man in black's expression changed again. His clone had entered some unknown place and had lost contact with the main body. No matter how he tried to summon and control it, there was no response. However, the clone was clearly not dead. He could feel it. How could such a thing happen? The man's skinny face was filled with confusion. "What's wrong?" asked a general of Dayuan. "My clone has lost contact but it's not dead. This is the first time I've encountered such a situation." The thin man answered in confusion and astonishment. "Since there's no danger, why don't we just send another person in to help?" The general of Dayuan was unconcerned as he thought to himself, "Is this fellow slacking off? He's afraid that the Residence of Nine Supremes is in danger and unwilling to go all out." Looking at the remaining clones, the general was displeased as well. "You have so many clones, why don't you send a few more in? If only one goes in, it's inevitable that he's weak. How can he not find out with so many clones working together? He's obviously not trying his best." Chapter 191. However, after the two doppelgangers entered, they silently lost contact with each other after a short while. They lost contact even faster than the first doppelganger. "This is strange, truly strange." The skinny man chuckled bitterly and said, "Do you all want to try as well?" 3 more people walked out slowly from their team. One of them said, "Brother Fei, we don't have your cloning skill. If we want to go in, we'll have to go in with our real bodies. This is a huge risk." Brother Fei furrowed his brows and said, "This realm is indeed strange. My avatar went in and didn't encounter any obstacles the entire time. Although my avatar is formless, it can still sense things in the outside world. No matter how big this mansion is, there must be a limit. How can it not encounter anything? Therefore, it's best for someone to go in with their real bodies. Now that it's so empty, it's unbearable." Even if my clone is still here, it's hard to do anything even if I have the strength and the intention. Another person said with a frown, since the residence of 9 Supremes has existed, no one has been able to test it successfully. All those who have barged in by force have died, without exception. Are we really going to take the risk? This trip is unusually dangerous, it's not worth it. Another person stroked his beard, his expression grim. Brother Fei gritted his teeth and said, Brother Liang, just go in. I'll have my 3 remaining clones accompany you. As long as we stay together and don't split up, I believe we'll be able to find something. He smiled and said, even if the residence of 9 Supremes is in danger, with my clone at the front, and Brother Liang, as 100%, it won't be a problem for you to escape unscathed. The one who was addressed as Brother Liang was an elder who looked to be in his 50s or 60s. He glanced at Brother Fei coldly and hesitated for a moment before saying, if so, this old man shall go in and take a look. Let's see if I can break the rule that those who barge into the residence of 9 Supremes must die. Brother Fei did not finish his sentence, but Yun Yang's gaze still flickered. Brother Liang? 100%? Could it be the empire of Dayuan's legend, Liang Yunqi, who was known as the Dragon of Clouds? If Ling Xiaozue was a legend of this world, then this person was a legend of the empire of Dayuan. He had countless disciples under him, and there were many capable people. He himself was a super expert at the 10th perfection level. It was said that even the emperor of Dayuan dynasty had to address him respectfully as Teacher Liang. Just as Yun Yang was wondering if this man was the legend of Dayuan, the 3 clones moved in unison, flying lightly into the thick fog of the residence of 9 Supremes. The body of Brother Liang also floated up as if it was weightless. He followed behind the 3 clones and entered the thick fog at the same time. The thick fog instantly closed up and the 3 clones and Brother Liang's figure disappeared. The thick fog was like a demon with its mouth wide open, swallowing the 4 of them at the same time. Although not all of the experts from the other side have entered, just that one surnamed Liang is already very much enough. Yun Yang lowered his head quietly as the light in his eyes shone brightly. His hand that was hidden in his sleeve gripped the 9 heavens dictum. The real 9 heavens dictum. Everyone was still staring at the clouds above the residence of 9 Supremes with widened eyes, waiting. Suddenly, the clouds that had been quiet and motionless rose abruptly. With a loud whoosh, it was as if a storm had suddenly swept through the thick fog. Whirlwind. The thick fog was stirred into a ball at that moment, surging and howling incessantly. The momentum was unprecedented. A patch of dark clouds gathered in midair at the same time. A moment later, the thick fog suddenly lit up. Everyone who was watching the situation at the residence of 9 Supremes felt a burning pain in their eyes. A bolt of purple lightning suddenly appeared. The lightning pillar was as thick as a person's thigh. With a loud boom, it struck down. After the first bolt of purple lightning descended, more bolts of purple lightning began to appear, crisscrossing in the thick fog. In the beginning, there were only a few dozen bolts, then a few hundred bolts, and then a few thousand bolts. Thunderous rumbles came again, lingering in everyone's ears. Even the ground beneath their feet trembled slightly because of it. Watching the scene unfold before their eyes, the cleaning soldiers of the residence of 9 Supremes who were watching coldly from the sidelines wore mocking expressions that they should have. How dare you small fries try to destroy the residence of the 9 Supremes lords? You're asking for death. Since you're asking for it, you deserve to die. Thunder and lightning continued to strike, its momentum lasting for a long time. Just as the power of the thunder was getting stronger, a ball of raging fire was also burning fiercely in the thick fog. There was also the wind that was originally entangled with the thick fog. The wind became stronger and stronger, and one could almost see the green wind marks in the thick fog. The wind marks seemed to have materialized as well. At this moment, a mass of blood suddenly appeared without any warning, and the thick fog instantly turned scarlet red. There was even a cry of agony. It was Brother Fei, who was pinching his heart seal outside. Suddenly, he paled and spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, he spat out 6 mouthfuls of blood consecutively. As if he had lost all his bones, he fell limply to the ground, no longer breathing. He had already passed out. Everyone at the scene suddenly realized that his 6 doppelgangers had all perished in there. No matter how mystical the shadow cloning art was and how he could recover as long as his clones were still alive, it was not without a price. All 6 clones had perished, and Brother Fei was severely injured, his vitality severely damaged. In spite of this, the thunder and lightning did not stop. Amidst the rolling fog, a silhouette could be vaguely seen, moving and evading in the thick fog. It was obvious that Brother Liang was still holding on, resisting the combined attack of wind, thunder, and fire. He's a 10th perfection expert indeed, he's the dragon of clouds, Liang Yunqi. To be able to hold on like this, he's amazing. Everyone else was speechless as they watched the thunder and lightning in the sky. To be able to dodge such dense thunder and lightning, and at the same time withstand the sharpness of the wind marks, the blood-red attack, and the burning of the fire, this legendary expert of Daiyuan was indeed worthy of being called a grandmaster, a legend of Daiyuan. However, this legendary expert could not rush out no matter what. He was clearly in front of him, but he was powerless. In the next moment, another cry of agony rang out from the depths of the fog. The blood-red aura suddenly blazed. Vaguely, it was the body of the Grandmaster who had leaped into the air. Suddenly, tens of thousands of lines of blood burst out. Then, the sound of the wind intensified. It was unprecedentedly ferocious, almost bursting everyone's eardrums. The power of the thunder and lightning also increased by 100-fold at this moment. The raging flames also became blazing white, and the extreme flames rushed to the heavens. Boom! The last loud tremor rang out. The entire ground shook thrice. Then, everything returned to silence. There was no sound at all. The blood-red color disappeared. The fire disappeared. The thunder and lightning disappeared. As the wind stopped, the clouds in the sky also returned to a state of stillness. There was only the most basic floating mist, all traces of the violence were covered by the fog. It was as if nothing had happened. However, everyone present was staring blankly at the scene, chills running down their spines. This was because everyone knew that not only were the 6 clones of Brother Fei annihilated, there was also the legendary Liang Yunqi, the Dragon of Clouds. He had probably already turned into a dragon god that no one had ever seen in the Sea of Clouds. His body and soul had been completely destroyed. It was the end of a legend, the final chapter. The old general of Daiyuan stared blankly at the clouds. Suddenly, his eyes rolled back and he fainted. He had never thought that a simple test would actually cause him to lose the anchor of Daiyuan's martial artists. With the cultivation base of a 10th perfection grandmaster, he could not even escape from the 9 heavens domain that had lost the 9 supremes guarding it. Why aren't you all moving? Yunyang cried out anxiously, get those few of you out quickly. The residence of 9 supremes is Yutong's sacred ground. What you're doing is really rude and unreasonable. Get them out quickly, or else, everyone in Yutong will not let this go. I'm speaking the truth, I'm not threatening you all at all. Come out. Everyone sighed in unison. If the old general of Daiyuan had not fainted, he would most probably have sighed aloud, if I could get them out, I would have F*King done it long ago. How I wish that I could get them out. No. I wish that this had never happened. Why did I scare Master Liang to go in and seek death? What else was there to talk about now? There were 6 clones of Brother Fei and a 10th perfection grandmaster who had gone in. There was a 99% chance that none of them would be able to come out. Even Brother Fei's real body and 6 clones outside had perished in a short period of time. He was severely injured and would be a cripple for at least 8 to 10 years. The destruction of the 6 clones had almost taken away his entire soul. There was a way to recover, but it would require a huge price to pay. How could it be an easy task? Everyone's faces were ashen, filled with disbelief and incredulity. Looking at the clouds above the residence of 9 Supremes, they could not help but shudder. It was as if the thunder and lightning were still striking them bit by bit. Such an outcome was truly too unexpected. Han Sanhe was still a little stiff. He even felt fortunate that it was not his side who had acted rashly in the beginning. If he had used his trump card first, it would have been Dongxuan's forces who had suffered a loss. It was a blessing in a misfortune. The residence of 9 Supremes is mystical indeed. It's not something a human can break. Han Sanhe sighed softly. The rest of the people present all nodded silently with complicated expressions on their faces. No wonder Ling Xiaozue has never gotten close to the residence of 9 Supremes despite being in Yutong for so many years. The spiritual sense of an almighty being would automatically avoid danger, but we've been spying on it. We're digging our own graves, we have nothing to do with anyone else. Another old general sighed, his expression somber. My wife's birthday, she asked me to accompany her out for a few days. I'm in Tsingtao now, I might not be able to explode these few days. Wait for me to return. Chapter 192. Han Sanhe was silent for a long time before he finally spoke in a low voice. Did anyone notice anything just now? The 3 old marshals beside him nodded quietly. What did they notice? Yunyang could not help but wonder, even I didn't notice anything odd. You fellows did? I'd like to hear what you fellows have noticed. Han Sanhe said, this old man observed carefully just now. The thick fog that shrouds the residence of 9 Supremes has always been there. Perhaps this can be overlooked because the residence of 9 Supremes has always been like this. No matter what happened, it hasn't changed at all. It's probably the foundation of the 9 heavens domain, and it also serves to block the line of sight as much as possible. However, the thunder and lightning, the glint of blood, the howling of the wind, and even the raging inferno that surged into the sky, all of them working together to suppress the intruders. It was a terrifying sight to behold, Han Sanhe said in a low voice cautiously. However, the other manifestations such as earth, water, wood, cloud, and metal did not appear to assist in the battle. The meaning behind this is intriguing. Once Han Sanhe said this, everyone's gaze flickered. Could it be understood that 4 of the 9 Supremes are still alive? Han Sanhe felt his voice turning hoarse as well. Supreme Thunder, Supreme Wind, Supreme Blood, and Supreme Flame, these 4 Supremes are still alive? The energy that hasn't appeared can be understood as, they are all dead? Everyone fell silent at the same time. Even if they understood it this way, at least 4 of the 9 Supremes were still alive. These 4 people were enough to prop up Yutong. However, where were they now? The rustling sound of sweeping could be heard again. The old soldiers began to sweep the floor meticulously like before. One of the large brooms was about to reach their feet. Are you done looking? Are you done? The old soldier held the broom, his eyes filled with mockery and contempt as he said faintly, if you're done, leave quickly. If you wish to continue exploring, please leave early. After you leave, we still have to clean this place and scrub it with water. Yunyang was puzzled. Why do we have to do this? Because this piece of land is dirty. It's been tarnished. The veteran said indifferently and began to sweep the ground again. Dirty? Tainted? The generals of the continent were momentarily dumbfounded. We've only been standing here for a while. How did the ground become dirty? Tainted? What kind of explanation was that? Could it be that she had been tainted by us? Everyone involuntarily took a few steps back, only to see a few one-armed men carrying buckets of water. With a splash, the water splashed onto the ground where everyone had just been standing. Then, 7 or 8 veterans bent down and rubbed the ground hard, carefully cleaning it. Then, another bucket of water. The eyes of the generals were filled with rage. This was going too far. Yunyang said slowly, "No need to be surprised. This is the respect the people of Yutong have for the 9 Supremes Lords. This respect will not diminish with the passage of time. Although the 9 Supremes Lords are no longer here, this place is still not to be tainted by anyone. In my opinion, cleaning the ground with water is already the greatest courtesy we can offer you. It's a great tolerance that we didn't go up and *ck you all. Humans must be content. Those who are content will always be happy, those who aren't." Yunyang crossed his arms and faced all the generals in front of him, including Han Sanhe, arrogantly, and said, "Generals, you can ask yourselves, who has the confidence to say that after he's dead, there will still be so many people who would do this for him? Is there anyone who has the confidence to say that after he's dead for a few years, there will still be—" Yunyang did not finish his sentence, ending it with a cold chuckle. The faces of the generals in the camp suddenly turned red. Looking at Yunyang's disdainful gaze, even the old generals could not help but feel ashamed. Compared to the silent residents of 9 Supremes, their achievements in this lifetime were just a drop in the bucket. Of course the 9 Supremes are powerful enough. Otherwise, we wouldn't have come here to pay our respects. The youth in black looked at Yunyang coldly. "But what are you so proud of? Look at you, it's as if you're one of the 9 Supremes. Let's talk about your first question first. Say, pay your respects." Yunyang's face was full of mockery. "Child, so when you pay your respects to your ancestors, you'll first think about how to dig it up? Or perhaps you'll invite a mighty figure to probe the ancestral graves? I really didn't expect the customs of other countries to be so different from Yutong. Today, I've learned another world. This trip is not in vain, it's not in vain. However, isn't your method of paying respects a little too disrespectful to your ancestors? Anyway, if my descendants dare to treat their ancestors like this, I'll consider it lucky if they don't die." The youth in black was at a loss for words, his face flushed and his eyes spitting fire. "You? What about me?" Yunyang said mercilessly, "I'm just a tour guide. Do you still want to stop me from speaking? I'm sorry, you can stop me from eating but you can't stop me from speaking. Also, I'm proud because the 9 Supremes are in Yutong. They're Yutong's people. Why don't you ask those veterans if they're as proud as I am? We're like the 9 Supremes, we're all Yutong's people." Yunyang raised his head and said, "Besides, Yutong doesn't only have the 9 Supremes, there's also the Shangguan family of generals. There's also the Hall of Loyal Soul. What do you have?" Yunyang chuckled delightedly. "We respect our heroes to such an extent, it comes from our sincerity. But the few of you—" "I won't talk about it," the youth in black said angrily, "go on. What about us? You? You know your own family best. Do you really want an outsider to talk about it?" Yunyang said coldly, "Forget it. I didn't want to open up your scars but since you want to hear it so much, I'll talk about it." He paused and said, "Let's start with the empire of Dongxian. Let's start with your god of war, Han Sanhe. He's the pride of Dongxian, isn't he? It's a pity that this martial Han, who's meritorious to Dongxian, is an enemy to us who has a blood debt. However, to what extent is your martial Han suspected by the royal family in your country now? Do you really need me to say this?" Yunyang said faintly, "Let's not talk about anything else. Let's talk about whether Marshal Han can enjoy the same treatment as the Shangguan family of generals or the 9 Supremes. I'll only ask Marshal Han Sanhe this: how long do you think your family can survive after you've passed away? Do you dare to speak your mind to me? Yun Yang's gaze was like a knife, his words were like a knife as well. Every strike was aimed at the most crucial point. Han Sanhe paled, speechless for a moment. Yun Yang's words had hit him where it hurt the most. If Han Sanhe were to die, his family would lose this great umbrella. Annihilation would only be a matter of time. This was something the entire continent could see, it was undeniable. Before Han Sanhe could answer, Yun Yang turned to look at the other three old marshals from the other three countries. Marshal Xiao Yuntian of the Empire of Tianxi, do you think your position and situation in the Empire of Tianxi are any different from Marshal Han's? Perhaps you can confidently say that your situation is better than Marshal Han's, but how much better is this better? Is there even a strand of hair? Xiao Yuntian's white beard trembled, unable to respond. The old marshal who has fainted over there is from the Empire of Dayuan. Your situation must be better than Marshal Han or Marshal Xiao, much better, Yun Yang said faintly. Now that Dayuan's emperor and officials are on good terms, there's nothing to worry about. However, there seems to be a limit to this, or perhaps it's temporary. This young master has heard that His Majesty the Empire of Dayuan's emperor is smart and vigorous despite his age. He even had a little princess a few years ago, but he's still 75 years old now, isn't he? He's deposed 3 or 4 crown princes in total. The crown prince now has been crown prince for more than 10 years, I think he's almost 40. It's said that he's rather anxious for the throne. Yun Yang said faintly, these are all internal affairs of the royal family, they have nothing to do with the old marshal. However, I've also heard that the old marshal and the crown prince before he became crown prince had an affair. Back then, the crown prince who was still a prince had his eyes on the old marshal's granddaughter, but the old marshal was adamant about it. Later on, the granddaughter had mysteriously returned home after an outing and committed suicide. It said that the old marshal had barged into the palace and beat the crown prince, who was still a prince at the time, into a coma because of this. Yun Yang said, I wonder how well old marshal's family will fare after His Highness the Crown Prince ascends to the throne. Perhaps His Highness the Crown Prince is wise and mighty, forgetting the past. That's not impossible. Actually, there's no concrete evidence for these gossips. I didn't want to mention it and I shouldn't have. However, why do you all treat our country's hero like this? Don't blame me then. Rumors are always baseless, but there's always a reason behind it. Yun Yang's gaze fell on the last old marshal and said faintly, you must be the Empire of Zio's Marshal Z. I've only mentioned you last because your situation is the most stable. There's basically nothing much to say. After all, Marshal Z is of royal blood and is His Majesty's biological brother from the same mother. Your situation is as stable as a mountain. But, there are some things, old Marshal, do I need to be frank? Marshal Z gritted his teeth and said, then there's no need to say it. Yun Yang turned to look at the residence of 9 Supremes and said faintly, the Empire of Yutong's emperor is at the prime of his life and possesses a profound cultivation base. No matter what, it's only a matter of time before he reigns for another 30 years. What happened to your side won't happen here. You all can't deny this, can you? Besides, for more than 100 years, the Empire of Yutong's military generals have held military power in each generation. The military power in the Empire's generals' hands is more than 70%. However, have the past emperors ever suspected anyone? Chapter 193. From the Shengguan family of generals in the beginning, to the military generals like Qiu Lengtia now. It's not impossible that there aren't any achievements that can intimidate the emperor, but it's rare that the emperor doesn't mind it. This is the true harmony between the emperor and his subjects. As for the 9 Supreme Sirs, His Majesty doesn't even know the names, identities, or appearances of the 9 Supreme Sirs, but he dares to entrust the fate of the nation and the war to us. How generous is he? Now that all of you have come here to compete with us, do you think you can win? To say that all of you are arrogant and overestimating yourselves is an understatement. You're like ants trying to shake a tree. Yun Yang's cold gaze slid across the faces of the generals as he said softly, "That's why I'm so proud in front of all of you. It's because I'm a citizen of Yutong. Not only me, but every citizen in the Empire of Yutong will be equally proud when faced with all of you. This isn't just my pride alone, it's the pride of the entire nation." Yun Yang smiled and turned to look at the youth in black, saying mockingly, "Child, I know that your identity is extraordinary and that you have an extraordinary background. If you really have the guts, go back and tell your emperor not to be suspicious of Han Sanhe. Can you do it?" The youth in black snorted angrily and turned his face away, gritting his teeth. This time, he did not even want to reply with a word or two. He could not do it. He really could not do it. If this could be done easily, would Han Sanhe not have done it a long time ago? Why would he have waited until now? When the group arrived at the residence of 9 Supremes, they argued all the way. Who would have thought that they would still argue all the way when they left the residence of 9 Supremes? Just as the group was about to turn a corner, everyone turned at the same time and stared at the residence of 9 Supremes that was shrouded in mist, their gazes growing increasingly complicated. No matter what. This place would definitely become a legend in the Tianxian continent. It would become a sacred place in the Empire of Yutong, or even the entire world. Yun Yang looked like he did not notice anything, only walking forward angrily. In reality, the reactions of every single person in the various countries were all under his observation and observation. Among the 200 men, some were deep in thought, some were frowning in contemplation, some had glints in their eyes, and some looked menacing. Someone would definitely come to the residence of 9 Supremes again tonight. Yun Yang could figure this out even if he used his buttocks to think. In spite of this, Yun Yang was not the least bit worried. To put it bluntly, Yun Yang was confident that he could kill Ling Xiaozue even if he were to challenge the residence of 9 Supremes formation. Even the world's #1 expert was defeated, not to mention others. Come, the more, the better. It would be best if the 200 of you charged into the formation together and all of you died inside. That would be the real solution. Since the beginning of the return journey, the generals of various countries had surprisingly realized that the Yutong tour guide seemed to be unprecedentedly passionate. "Hey everyone, how about we go to the Ni Chong Pavilion tonight? There are a lot of beautiful girls there, and all of them are talented. They only sell their skills but not their bodies. It's just that they pick their customers. You have to have some confidence in yourself to go there. If you're really taken by a girl, it won't look good. Is it because you don't like it or because you don't have confidence? Why don't we go to the fairy's nest? Although the girls there aren't real fairies, they all resemble immortals and are definitely not for show. You don't like it? You don't like such an elegant place? Then let's go to the Rouge and Powder brothel. The ladies there are all soft and fragrant. Do you all prefer the most direct method? We're all men, just say it. If you want something simple and direct, go to the Hall of Beauties. We'll let you in as long as you pay. Not only are the girls beautiful, they're even better at martial arts. I guarantee that you'll enjoy yourself so much that you forget to go home. Oh, where do you all want to go? Say something, you must have a preference. I can arrange it if you tell me. Besides, didn't you all come all the way here for this? Don't be shy, you're a man, is it so hard to say something? Quick, quick, quick. Oh, you're shy with me? We're all men, we know each other. Could it be that you've been in the military for too long that you've developed a special hobby? That's not a problem. Although I'm not good at this and Yutong doesn't have many places like that, it's not a problem to find a few to help you solve your problems. However, you have to do it one by one, you can't be too violent. Yun Yang had been extremely passionate along the way, recommending them with all his might and talking nonsense. The generals of various countries looked at this bastard with a sideways glance, but no one answered him. "Look at how passionate you are. We almost forgot that you've been scolding us all the way here because of this. We almost forgot that you've been scolding us so harshly just now." In spite of this, the main reason why everyone ignored Yunyang was because he had gone overboard with his words. It was also because the other side had just lost a superb expert. Everyone had not calmed down yet. Their minds were still filled with the mysteriousness and power of the residents of 9 Supremes. How could they be in the mood to consider anything else? Besides, you bastard, you keep saying that you're all here to visit prostitutes, and all that nonsensical introduction. How are we supposed to go when you've already said that? Everyone's dignity has been torn off by you, yet we still want to follow you to the brothel? You're thinking too much. Even the few generals who were lecherous and could not sleep without women were wary. What if they followed this fellow into the brothel and he shouted, "This is the empire of Dongshuan's General Zhanggu, coming all the way here to find Yutang's lady to relieve his lust. Everyone, you must serve him well." Then, the prostitutes would probably suddenly go berserk and chase them out of the brothel. That would truly be an embarrassment to one's grandmother's house. What was the possibility of Yunyang doing something like this? Everyone thought about it. Judging from the integrity this fellow had displayed throughout the day, it was 100% certain that he would do it. Perhaps there was something even worse. What if they were doing it with their butts bare and this fellow suddenly barged in with his men? Based on such careful consideration, everyone ignored Yunyang's passionate invitation like they were deaf and mute. They could not hear. They did not want to speak, they were not in the mood at all. "Why don't?" Yunyang said tentatively, "Let's play somewhere else. We can't just walk for a day, can we?" Still, no one spoke. F***ck, what do all of you want? Why don't you F***king fart? Yunyang finally found a reason to lash out and exploded. "Tell me, have all of you become mute? You've asked me to be your tour guide but you won't talk to me until now. I've already swallowed my pride and introduced all of you to places of your dreams, yet you're treating me like this. You, what do all of you want?" Yunyang howled in indignation. "Are all of you trying to play me to death?" All the generals were exasperated, almost groaning in pain with their palms. Everyone could not help but think that this fellow was not easy to get along with. Han Sanha's head throbbed as well. He could already tell that this fellow called Yunyang was an even more troublesome presence than Qiu Jianhan. He was purely here to toy with them. Moreover, he was enjoying it tirelessly. He was a scoundrel. He had been talking nicely just a moment ago, but in the blink of an eye, he had turned hostile and started scolding them. Following that, he had gone on a rampage and started a war of words with everyone. Then, he had switched his stance swiftly to strike up a conversation with someone to establish a familiar atmosphere. Once they had become familiar, he would start scolding them again without warning, digging all sorts of traps with ease. Yunyang had such a talent. It had only been a day and a half, but he had already changed his expression 5 to 6 times. Even Han Sanha found it hard to deal with this troublemaker, both mentally and physically exhausted. Did we come here with ulterior motives or were we just playing along with this child so that he could greatly increase Yutang's cohesiveness? This was simply, besides, there were so many of us here. Which one of us was not a legendary general in the Tianxian continent? Most of the people in the continent would be filled with respect when they saw us. Those who were more cowardly would even be silenced by the aura of the iron-blooded generals. In spite of this, not only was it useless in front of this young Master Yun, it had even led to the opposite effect. He could laugh and scold freely, laughing when he wanted to laugh and jumping up and down when he wanted to scold. He could still come forward to make friends after he was done scolding them. All the old generals were experienced and knowledgeable, but this was the first time they had seen such a shameless troublemaker. Compared to Qiu Jianhan, who was renowned in the military world and was publicly acknowledged by the nations, this child seemed to be even better. After all, Qiu Jianhan was only thick-skinned, he was not completely shameless. This young Master Yun, on the other hand, could be incomparably delicate one moment and brazenly tear off his own skin and stuff it into his pocket the next. Faced with such a troublemaker, even with Han San's experience and wisdom, he was helpless and could only sigh helplessly. "Why don't we drink?" Yun Yang scolded for a while before he suddenly rolled his eyes and put on his most gentle smile again. The smile on his face was so sincere that no one could bear to reject him. "I'll go get a few pots of blood of the hero later. Let's drink until we're drunk. Don't worry, these few pots of wine are all on me. I won't make you spend. It's rare for us to meet and we're good friends. Money is but a mere worldly possession, it's not worth much." Young Master Yun said. "Good friends? Whoever has a friend like you must not have burned incense in their past life, their ancestral graves would have exploded long ago." The generals were filled with disgust. However, their eyes still shone. Blood of the hero? Chapter 194. Yun Yang had used the blood of the hero as bait, but he had only tasted it. The soldiers who were still intoxicated by the wine could not resist much. Besides, they still had to stay here for more than 10 days and had so many plans to execute. It would not be good if their relationship with this designated tour guide was strained. "Didn't you, Yun Yang, want to put on an act? Who doesn't know how to do that? However, feigning civility is what we are good at." All right, young Master Yun is straightforward indeed." A bearded general stood up with a smile. "We still have to take 2 more pots of wine. What's the problem? 1,500 silver taels per pot, how many pots should we take?" Yun Yang said generously, "Who's going to pay?" The bearded general glared at Yun Yang for a long time but could not utter a single word. "Didn't you say you were going to treat us just now?" Yun Yang stared at them with clear, righteous eyes and said matter-of-factly, "I said that I would treat all of you to a few pots of wine, of course I meant it. However, it's only a few pots. Are you sure that a few pots are enough for all of you to drink? Do you want me to pay for the rest? There's no such logic in this world." In the face of such righteousness and confidence, who could resist such a confident speech? The bearded general was fuming for a moment, but he did not dare to argue with Yun Yang. After all, in terms of shamelessness, even if the generals of the allied forces were to come together, they would not be this child's opponent. Moreover, he was alone. It was better not to embarrass himself. "I'll do it." The bearded general was gritting his teeth when he fished out the banknotes. He had snatched the one to pay the bill with his first move. Even when he knew that he had the upper hand, it was still depressing to take the loss. "How much exactly?" "We have quite a lot of people here, 200 of us." Yun Yang asked enthusiastically, 100 pots? Is 100 pots enough?" The man held his breath and gritted his teeth. "A pot is 20 caddies, 100 pots would be 2,000 caddies. How can we drink so much? Give me 100 pots." Looking at the strange gazes of the surrounding generals, the bearded general finally waved his hand generously. He could not afford to lose face like this. The general is straightforward after all, definitely a great character, bright and heroic. Yun Yang took the banknotes and laughed. "I'll go arrange for the wine now." And the dishes that go with it." Shopkeeper. Come, pick your signature dishes and serve 20 tables. Do you see that forthright general over there? Just settle the bill with him, without any hesitation." Yun Yang exited the room beaming. "I'll go get the wine now. It'll be quick. I'll be right back." Before he finished speaking, he disappeared with a whoosh. The general's eyes widened in shock. "This bastard. He actually threw the money for the food to me? How much silver did I bring? These silvers. I still need to buy wine for my brothers and transport it back, but from the looks of it, he would probably go bankrupt after eating this meal. A few generals from the same country as him stood up silently. Dayuan will pay for this meal. Han Sanha's eyes glinted. The generals of Dayuan seemed to be quite united. According to what he knew, this bearded man had a fiery temper and did not have a good relationship with his colleagues. However, not only did the others not kick him when he was down, they had completely put aside their personal grudges and shouldered this meal in the name of Dayuan. Even though Yun Yang's method of losing money was like a stroke of genius, the pressure was much lesser now that it was distributed among 50 people. Even if there were still losses, it was not as severe as it seemed. That night, the Tower to Heaven Inn was brightly lit and extremely noisy. Yun Yang grabbed the wine and urged them to drink. Come, cheers. Another bowl. Let's drink together. Everyone is generous indeed, come. Men of the military indeed, one more. This wine is great, it makes my blood boil. Come, let's drink. As they drank, many of the generals grew disgruntled. We're all drinking a bowl and you're only taking a sip. What is this? You've already drunk with dozens of us, but you haven't even finished half of this bowl, have you? This child is playing tricks. A few people rushed over. Swoosh. Yun Yang emptied it in one gulp. Come, let's get serious now. The crowd was stunned. Had he been drinking the entire time just now? However, Yun Yang's alcohol tolerance was quite good. He downed bowl after bowl without a change in expression. They drank until midnight, swaying from side to side and piling up under the tables. However, Yun Yang's eyes were sharp. From the beginning to the end, he was paying attention to every detail. There were many who drank too much or were drunk, but at least 3 or 4 of them had left the banquet, their whereabouts unknown. After a while, the drunkenness grew stronger, but there were another 7 or 8 people missing. If it had been someone else, they might have suspected that these fellows had drunk too much and had gone to find a place to sleep, but Yun Yang did not think so. These fellows had come with ulterior motives, how could they miss the opportunity? He had purposely created a messy drinking opportunity. Would they let go of this chance to take advantage of the chaos? 99% of those who had gone missing had gone to the residence of 9 Supremes. Yun Yang's gaze flickered as he hopped onto the table with a loud thud and hollered, "Who else? Who else is a man? Come, drink with me. I'll drink all of you to death today." Another round of guzzling, another 17 or 18 people were missing. Yun Yang could see clearly that those who were missing were the attendants and guards of the generals. Not a single one of the great imperial generals was missing. Let's go, the more the merrier. Yun Yang finally felt that it was about time, stumbling towards Han Sanha. Marshal Han, ugh. I propose a toast to you. Come on, cheers. He raised his bowl and craned his neck. The crimson wine dripped, but most of it landed on his neck. Then, young Master Yun rolled his eyes and chuckled. Good wine. Good wine. How King satisfying. Before he could finish, a certain someone closed his eyes and collapsed. Coincidentally, she fell right into Han Sanha's embrace. Thunderous snores could be heard immediately. She was snoring as she slept, and wine was spilling out of her mouth at the same time. Was he drunk? Han Sanha was caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. He watched as Yun Yang fell asleep in his embrace, sleeping in such an odd manner. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. Han Sanha tried a few more times to make sure that the fellow was truly unconscious. He could not help sighing. This bastard really knew how to pick his targets. Whoever he had fallen to, he would have been kicked away, but he had fallen into Han Sanha's embrace. Han Sanha was crowned the continent's top general, the continent's god of war. Even if he wanted to, he could not bring himself to do such a thing. However, was he supposed to just hug him to sleep? Han Sanha thought about it and felt a chill run down his spine. Send him to a room. Watching Yun Yang being sent away, Han Sanha's gaze turned deep. The youth dressed in black beside him was looking at Han Sanha with a questioning gaze. Don't go. Han Sanha sucked in a deep breath and said, give up on the operation against the residents of Nine Supremes. The young man in black was confused. If those people who went there earlier come back, it's not too late for you to go tomorrow. Han Sanha said in a low voice, if they don't come back, I hope you'll give up on this idea. The youth in black lowered his head and nodded silently. What do you think of this young Master Yun? Han Sanha asked. He's just a popinjay. What can he do? The youth in black pursed his lips in disdain. What can he do? Han Sanha sucked in a breath, his gaze clear. This person is an extremely terrifying and extraordinary character. There's no mistaking this. An extremely terrifying character? Just from the fact that he fell into your arms defenselessly just now, how could he be considered extremely terrifying? The youth in black rolled his eyes and said, besides, even if he's really terrifying, he won't be a threat anymore. Han Sanha asked, What did you do? I used a soul-sealing needle to test if he was really drunk. A murderous glint flashed in the youth's eyes. The poison on the needle will act up half a month later. I've already confirmed that the poison of the soul-sealing needle has melted into his bloodstream as a blue line. So, even if this person is immensely capable, he's doomed. The youth in black said. Han Sanha frowned and asked, are you confident? There's no antidote to the soul-sealing needle. The youth's gaze was cold. It's just like that poison. Han Sanha sighed softly and frowned, as if he did not agree with such a method. However, he did not say anything in the end, only saying faintly, this old man is already old. The youth in black said, Marshall is in his prime, how can you say that you're old? He then stopped talking and helped Han Sanha back to their room to rest. In the guest room, Yun Yang was sprawled out on the bed, his snores deafening, sleeping like a dead pig. However, one of his right hands was placed at the base of his thighs. Yun Yang's snores were rhythmic, his eyes were shut and his eyeballs were unmoving. Occasionally, he would mumble and spit out a mouthful of wine. If anyone saw him like this, they wouldn't suspect that he was pretending to be drunk. However, on his right thigh, his right hand moved quickly. A faint blue light suddenly flashed on his thigh, and a needle as thin as a cow's hair had already reached between his two fingers. In the blink of an eye, the blue needle had disappeared. Yun Yang's mind was clear. What a vicious move. Chapter 195. There's no antidote for the soul-sealing spike. Everyone in the world knows this. However, the soul-sealing spike has its origins. It's from the school of spring and autumn, it's the school's unique secret weapon. Could this youth be related to the school of spring and autumn? Is the school of spring and autumn related to the Four Seasons Tower? Spring and autumn? But it occupies half of the Four Seasons. Is it a coincidence or is there something else? Also, the poison of the soul-sealing spike is somewhat similar to the poison in His Majesty. Could it be, in Yun Yang's heart, it was like a huge, intricate machine was operating meticulously. Yun Yang could clearly feel that he seemed to have grasped something, found something. Yun Yang did not sleep that night. He was only pretending to be asleep the entire time, pretending to be drunk. However, it was not only Yun Yang who did not sleep well. Too many people did not sleep well either. To be more precise, the entire Tiantang city did not sleep well. For the latter half of the night, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled as the wind howled. It only stopped when it was almost dawn. The rumbling of thunder and lightning and the howling wind caused half of Tiantang's city to tremble. Later on, one or a few strange roars could be heard continuously, but they were drowned out by the even more persistent thunder. Everyone was waiting. Waiting for a result. However, to everyone's knowledge, Yunyang had slept exceptionally soundly. The reason they came to such a conclusion was that there were many who had come to check on young Master Yun's sleeping state. However, seeing that young Master Yun had not even changed his position from the beginning to the end, sleeping like a pig with thunderous snores, they could only shake their heads speechlessly. This fellow could really sleep. The lightning and thunder were so loud that the ground was almost turning upside down. It was the end of the world outside, yet this fellow could still sleep so soundly. Could it be that he was fighting it with his thunderous snoring? Was his thunderous snoring really that effective? However, no one was interested in paying attention to him anymore. Because what happened last night really shocked everyone to the point of indescribable, shocking fear. The nation's losses at the residence of 9 Supremes last night had been immense. Yunyang's guess was right. They were only there to scout during the day, but at night, it was their main show against the residence of 9 Supremes. The existence of the residence of 9 Supremes in Yutong was like a sharp sword that was always hanging over the heads of other countries. Thinking back to the 9 Supremes' invincible prowess back then, thinking about how the 9 Supremes could sweep the battlefield with their insignificant cultivation base combined with the power bestowed by the 9 Heavens domain, they were invincible. How could he not covet it? The 9 Supremes seemed to be dead and had disappeared, but there were signs that indicated that there were still people alive among the 9 Supremes. Even if it could be confirmed that at least half of the 9 Supremes were dead, the remaining few were still not to be underestimated. They still had the ability to stir up a storm and turn the world upside down. Besides, the 9 Heavens domain was right here. What if the Empire of Yutong had completed the 9 Supremes? This is not impossible, right? He had to eliminate this hidden danger and nip it in the bud. Even if he could not bring the 9 Heavens domain back to study and use it for his own use, he could at least destroy it. It was based on this mentality that the other countries had still sent out a large number of people despite the presence of Dayuan's legend, Broken Halberd sinks into sand, and Brother Fei, who was severely injured, during the day. There were a total of 18 top-notch experts and 6 high-level mystical beasts. The lineup was extravagant. If these people attacked together, they were confident that they could defeat Ling Xiaozue even if they were to face him head-on. This formidable combat force that the other countries had high hopes for split into 24 directions and attacked the residence of 9 Supremes at the same time. Unfortunately, not a single one of them made it out. Not only the top-notch experts, but even the 6 high-level mystical beasts, especially the 2 8th-level flying mystical beasts, did not make it out. The thunder and lightning in the residence of 9 Supremes and the howling of the wind lasted for the entire night, only returning to peace at dawn. However, the residence of 9 Supremes was still the residence of 9 Supremes, unshaken and no different from the day before. However, the 18 experts and 6 high-level Xian beasts that entered had all disappeared without a trace, and there were no longer any signs of life. Like a clay ox sinking into the sea, they had collapsed, never to be seen again. However, after losing so many top-notch combat forces, not even the slightest bit of information about the residence of 9 Supremes had been obtained. Not even a single tile of the residence of 9 Supremes had been damaged. Not even the shape of the clouds above the residence of 9 Supremes had been damaged. This result was unacceptable to the other countries. Other than the Empire of Dongxian, the other 3 countries were filled with regret. They had suffered a huge loss this time. The next morning, Yunyang woke up and walked out groggily. He washed his face while staggering, finally looking much more energetic. In the hall, Han Sanhe and the youth dressed in black watched him from the corner of their eyes. Yun Yang had only taken 2 steps before he began to scratch his thigh with his right hand, seemingly unintentionally. Yun Yang's current official identity was that of a tour guide sent by Yutong. It was natural for him to count the number of people and ask about the whereabouts of those who were missing. However, the other empires did not know how to answer him. They could not possibly say, "Those people who went on a mission last night have all died," can they? They were here as guests, at least on the surface. Go look for them quickly. Yun Yang reminded them kindly, "It won't be good if we miss someone. Could it be that they're still sleeping after drinking too much last night? Their alcohol tolerance is a little low, they've only drunk so little." A general said with a dark expression, "There's no need to look for them. Since they haven't come out yet, it means that they don't want to participate in today's mission." "What are you talking about?" Yun Yang asked in confusion. "Don't they respect the Shangguan family of generals?" Before his words echoed in the air, his tone turned indignant as he said angrily, "Why don't they go to the family of generals?" "What do you mean?" "Quickly call them over. This is too much. This is too much." All the generals had the urge to strangle him. "Those people are all dead. Where are we going to get them to call for help? If we really go, not only will we not be able to call them back, we won't be able to come back as well. There's no need to be so serious. The Shangguan family of generals and the generals of other empires have been enemies for generations, there's a deep grudge between them. Not everyone has to respect them completely, our standpoints are different after all. If they don't want to go, then they don't want to go. Let us go." Han Sanhe's expression was dark as he said, "There's no need to dwell on these minor details." Yun Yang widened his eyes and did not say anything else, but his mouth continued to grumble and grumble. No one knew what he was cursing. One of the men came closer and heard, "A bunch of bastards, not worshipping the family of generals when you've come to Yutong. I curse your entire family to die without descendants, to have green smoke rising from your ancestral graves." He almost fell to the ground with a somersault. This bastard's curse was too vicious. Chapter 196. Han Sanhe's words calmed the situation down immediately. Han Sanhe's words made sense. The Shangguan family of generals was indeed revered by the continent's military, it was undeniable and unquestionable. However, they had been enemies for generations. Although the Shangguan family of generals was now filled with widows, orphans, and children, and all the men and women had been killed, the number of soldiers who had perished in the Shangguan family of generals was several times more than that. These fallen soldiers had descendants as well, even if they revered the Shangguan family of generals' loyalty, they were still irreconcilable enemies. It was reasonable that they still held a grudge against the Shangguan family of generals for paying respects to them today. Yun Yang was still mumbling as he led the way, cursing as he walked. "What kind of bastards are these? They said they were here to be guests but they didn't follow the rules. How dare they cause trouble at such an important time to raise their own statuses? Your father curses these bastards that they won't be able to wake up from their slumber. What's the point of living if they don't show up for such an important event? Hurry up and die, reincarnate." The generals from the other countries were breathing heavily, their eyes wide as they stared at Yun Yang in disbelief. Even if they wanted to retort, they did not have the words to do so. Yun Yang had been mumbling along the way, the generals from the other countries almost breaking down from his nagging. The experience was an unprecedented depressing one. They had been scolded all the way to the residence of 9 Supremes, and they had been scolded all the way here to the family of generals. King Hell, they had come to Yutong this time to spend money to get scolded. Other than spending a lot of money, they had basically accomplished nothing. Other than losing their soldiers and their capabilities, the only thing left was to be scolded. What are the 4 generals from the other empires doing now? His Majesty looked at old Marshal Qiu, who was sitting opposite him in a relaxed manner. I heard that the residents of 9 Supremes caused a huge commotion last night. The entire Tiantang city could sense it. Qiu Jianhan was about to speak when his shoulders suddenly shook. He could not help but burst into laughter. Just as he opened his mouth, he coughed, cough. Ha! Ha! His Majesty secretly rolled his eyes, watching the old man go crazy quietly. Perhaps your Majesty doesn't know, the old marshal laughed for a long time before he finally stopped. His body was still trembling, looking as if he could burst into laughter at any time. The residence of 9 Supremes is, of course, as stable as a mountain. I heard that many of their men have died inside, including De Yuan's unrivaled expert, the Dragon of Clouds, Liang Yunqi. However, there's something else that makes this old man unable to contain his excitement. I have to say, Han San's eyes are sharp indeed. He took a liking to Yun Yang at first glance and wanted him to be their guide. He's really chosen the right person. His Majesty was puzzled. Why did you choose the right person? Cough, cough. Ha! I heard that Yun Yang, this child, has almost played the envoys to death. Qiu Jianhan laughed until he was out of breath. This child is truly a talent. His eloquence is unparalleled in the world. I heard that. Old Marshal Qiu was patient as he recounted everything that Yun Yang had done in detail. The king's eyes widened. He actually used the word brothel, and caused so many people to collapse? He even caused the people to be united against a common enemy, their morale unprecedentedly high. He even scolded the people of other countries in front of the residents of 9 Supremes, so badly that they couldn't fight back even if they attacked him together. He scolded them all the way. Then he made a fortune selling wine. He's still scolding them all the way. Scolding the generals of other countries like they're his grandchildren. As he spoke, the emperor's hearty laughter broke through the hall and reverberated in the air above the royal palace, causing everyone who heard it to jump in fright. It had been a long time since they had seen His Majesty so cheerful. What was wrong with him today? Listening to his laughter, he was overjoyed. He had lost his composure. What good news could it be? It must be a very, very good thing to make His Majesty lose his composure like this. Towards the end of his laughter, His Majesty was already out of breath, especially as he listened to the old marshal imitating Yun Yang scolding, cheating, falling out on purpose, exploding in anger, making friends one moment and cursing the next, all sorts of evil deeds. His Majesty laughed until he almost suffocated from laughing so hard. After so many years, today was the happiest day. There shouldn't be anything today. They're only going to pay respects to the family of generals' heroic spirits. I believe these fellows won't do anything to cause trouble in the family of generals. His Majesty laughed and said, "Still, I'm looking forward to what Yun Yang will do next. Old Qiu, have your men keep an eye out and report any new developments." Old Marshal Qiu was grinning from ear to ear. "Don't worry, Your Majesty. How can this old man let go of such a delightful thing? This old man has even arranged secret guards along the way to all the places they're going. Be sure to record every word they say, then come back and report to this old man. It's best if they can record all of Yun Yang's expressions as well. It's a pity that I can't witness this show with my own eyes. It's a fly in the ointment." His Majesty was stunned. Was this old man making a mountain out of a molehill? He had actually deployed so many secret guards for such a trivial matter. However, it was indeed not too much of a waste to deploy secret guards for such a great show of the century. This old man has never encountered something so comforting and funny in my entire life. Of course, I have to collect more information. When these fellows leave, this old man will think about it when I have nothing to do. I'll think about it when I'm depressed too. Naturally, I'll be cheerful all the time and I won't have to worry anymore. Qiu Jianhan chuckled. The old marshal's chuckle was actually rather perverted at this moment. His Majesty coughed and said seriously, "Send a copy to me after you've recorded everything. I'm here to monitor whether you're using public property for your own benefit. Do you understand?" It turned out that the Emperor of all ages was also a two-faced character. He spoke righteously on the surface, but he had other thoughts in his mind. Facing the joint visit of the allied forces from various countries, the family of generals received them neither passionately nor indifferently. All in all, they conformed to the norm. Yun Yang, on the other hand, was much more well-behaved in the family of generals and did not speak much. Honestly, the old lady of the family of generals made Yun Yang feel uneasy from the bottom of his heart. He felt that he could not relax in front of this old lady, that he could not behave as he pleased. Shangguan Lingxiu led the generals to pay their respects in the ancestral hall. A few other generals were particularly interested in the Shangguan family's small drill ground and walked around it a few times. They looked at the weapons that had been rubbed until they shone as if they had been coated with a layer of oil. They looked at the ground that was harder than steel after being stepped on by countless people to practice martial arts for over 100 years. Looking at the silent rows of memorial tablets, Yi Zichen felt a chill run down his spine. They looked at the background of each Shangguan family member. All the generals' expressions became silent. Shangguan Sheng, married at the age of 15, entered the military at the age of 16, promoted to the vanguard of the army at the age of 18, died at the eastern border at the age of 20, Shangguan Jia, entered the military at the age of 18. In the winter of the same year, in order to rescue his comrades who were besieged, he led 300 cavalrymen to charge into the camp. He died under arrows, not even his bones were left. Shangguan Dong became a deputy general at the age of 16, a battalion's commanding general at the age of 18, a general of one side at the age of 22, the assistant marshal of the army at the age of 25, the marshal of the eastern troop at the age of 28, the marshal of Yutong at the age of 32, killed by a stray arrow at the age of 35, Shangguan Tiannan, enlisted after getting married at the age of 17, died at the Black Rock Keep in the same month. Shangguan. The generals were shocked to realize that the men of the Shangguan family had never entered the military at the age of 20. Most of them had stepped onto the battlefield at the age of 16 or 17 and had won hundreds of meritorious deeds. Their robes were stained with blood and their corpses were buried on the battlefield. There were only a few who had died after the war. It was due to bad luck. Most of them had been promoted step by step in the military, becoming generals, and marshals with the accumulation of meritorious deeds. There was one person recorded in the records that everyone had heard the most about. Shangguan Wudi, 28 years old, was the vanguard general of the Western troop. His sworn brother was ambushed and trapped. Alone, he charged at the Empire of Zio's 200,000-strong army from the east to the west, then from the west to the east. He charged back and forth 7 times, killing more than 10,000 of the enemy. However, his warhorse lost its front leg due to exhaustion and died under the siege of thousands of arrows. The Empire of Zio's generals looked at this record in great detail. The Empire of Zio's first marshal, Zi Yuanlong, had a particularly sour expression. Another old general from the Empire of Zio, Wang Yutong, whose hair and beard were all white, sighed. This old man is 93 years old this year. I'm considered old in the military. When Shangguan Wudi charged at the enemy back then, this old man was 19 years old. I was only a corporal, leading 5 brothers to serve in the army. Even though it's been 74 years, the memory of that battle is still fresh in my mind. Every time I dream of it, it's as if I can see the invincible general charging at us with a spear in hand. Back then, Shangguan Wudi wielded the overlord's sharp golden spear in his hand and rode the wind-lightning beast. One man and one steed, he regarded the army as nothing. He came and went like the wind, looking down on everyone. How majestic was that! In front of the army, he stood there alone and said to Zio's 200,000-strong army, "The marshal's flag is not allowed to be raised. Otherwise, it shall be chopped down." How could the marshal be threatened by him then? The marshal's flag was raised high to show his might. However, the moment the marshal's flag was raised, Shangguan Wudi charged at the marshal's flag alone, breaking it with a single slash of his sword. Then, he turned and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Just like that, he had broken 17 marshal's flags within a month. He was so angry that the marshal vomited blood and died. Shangguan Wudi's bravery was unparalleled in the world then. Han Sanhe said softly, "If he was such a hero, why did he charge 7 times in the midst of 200,000-strong army and tire himself to death? What kind of sworn brother could make him do this?" Chapter 197. Shame colored Wang Yutang's face. "We weren't sworn brothers in the beginning. It was when the marshal died from vomiting blood that the marshal's son sent experts to infiltrate Yutang and kidnapped Shangguan Wudi's wife and child." Once he said that, the generals from the other countries looked at him in disdain. Every despicable method could be used on the battlefield, and the victor would always be the king. However, it was taboo to use unorthodox methods outside of the battlefield. The method of kidnapping and threatening others was the lowest and most unorthodox method. Once any general used this method, no matter how impressive he was before, what results he achieved in battle, or what achievements he would have in the future, he would no longer be qualified to be listed among the famous generals of the continent. Implicating one's wife and children was a great taboo in the military. To use such a despicable tactic against a hero of a generation was even more infuriating and contemptible. Shangguan Wudi was told that if he charged into the formation as promised and died in the end, his wife and child would be released. If he could be saved, the grudge would be forgotten. However, Shangguan Wudi's wife committed suicide immediately when she found out that she was being used to threaten her husband. The young son in her arms was killed by the woman as well. The woman said then, "How can a lowly life be compared to my husband? If my husband charged into the formation, he would die without a doubt. If I go and leave my son alive, when he grows up and finds out that his father died because of him, he would be ashamed for the rest of his life. Why don't you go to the netherworld with me? I've let you and your son down in this life, but I hope that I can make it up to you in my next life." After saying that, she killed her beloved son and committed suicide right away, a smile lingering on her lips. Shangguan Wudi charged into the formation and finally found out that his wife and child had died. He was heartbroken and decided to die in the midst of the army because he didn't want to live anymore, on the other side. Shangguan Lingxiu spoke in a cold voice, "The passing of ancestor Wudi is a great humiliation to the Shangguan family." Since then, the Shangguan family swore that if they couldn't avenge this blood feud and end this karma, they would always worship the name of their sworn brother as a cover. Grandmother and little granduncle's memorial tablets will only be returned and the blood feud is avenged. This is the blood oath ancestor Wudi made with the qi of his dantian before he died. The descendants of Shangguan will remember it. All the generals immediately became solemn. It was also from then on that the continent established a new rule. No matter how one fought on the battlefield, no matter what methods one used, it was all within reason. However, one must not make things difficult for the family and children of one's opponent. Shangguan Lingxiu's voice was like a string of ice beads falling to the ground. Yunyang asked from the side, "What counts as revenge?" The empire of Zio's old marshal Wang Yutang closed his eyes dejectedly. Shangguan Lingxiu said faintly, "The marshal of the empire of Zio back then was Zihengzhong. It was his son, Ziyicheng, who committed such despicable acts after his death. Ziyicheng then initiated a mutiny and chased the empire of Zio's emperor off his throne. His own family became royalty. It has lasted until today. To settle this grudge, the empire of Zio must be annihilated and Zio royalty must be exterminated. Only then will it end. The empire of Zio's marshal, Zi Yuanlong, wore a grim expression. He, too, was of the empire of Zio's royal bloodline. He could not help feeling shaken when faced with such a story. Shangguan Lingxiu looked at him and said coldly, "Marshal Zi, don't worry. We won't attack you when you're in Yutong. To kill you, we'll have to do it on the battlefield. To annihilate Zio, we'll have to break through the Zio formation in a dignified manner and charge into Zitian City. We'll eradicate the Zihuang bloodline in a dignified manner before the world's heroes." Shangguan Lingxiu said faintly, "The continent's military grudge is only acknowledged by the nations as the only one left. As for the rest, be it life or death, victory or defeat, there's no gratitude nor grudge." The so-called "no gratitude nor grudge" and "an invincible promise" came from this. Shangguan Lingxiu's expression was calm and collected. However, Yunyang sucked in a cold breath when he heard what she said. To annihilate the empire of Zio and slaughter the entire royal family. This vengeance seemed to be difficult to exact. Yunyang had never been one to belittle himself. He could even be considered arrogant and thought highly of himself. However, Yunyang did not have a plan to annihilate a nation's royalty with his own family at the moment. After all, it was a little too difficult. The Shangguan family, generation after generation, will not rest until one of us is dead. We'll fulfill this wish. No matter the cost, we'll reunite ancestor Invincible's family in the underworld and in the netherworld. Shangguan Lingxiu said faintly after she finished, 50 to 60% of the Shangguan family's ancestors who are listed in the memorial tablets before us have such a story of Invincible. If all of you wish to pay your respects to them one by one, I'm afraid it'll take too long. She was obviously asking them to leave. However, even Han San had dared not say anything in the face of the Shangguan family's eviction order. Among the densely packed memorial tablets, how many of them were more illustrious than his battle achievements? How many of them were the lifetime idols of the world's militants? Besides, other than Dongxian, the exploration of the residence of 9 supremes had also damaged the high-end combat power of each country. A conservative estimate would be that 10% of the country's high-end combat power had been lost. This loss had to be compensated as soon as possible, or else there would be hidden threats. Therefore, it was more important to return home as soon as possible. It's good that you're fine. Then I shall go home tonight and not accompany you all. These 2 days have really tired me out. This job is F*King difficult. I need to drink more water to replenish myself. Yunyang seemed to be relieved. Yunyang seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, but he did not know that it was the generals from the other countries who were truly relieved. They were afraid that this fellow would use his mouth again. In spite of this, all of them were grumbling inwardly, "You need to drink more water to replenish yourself? You're only thirsty because you scold us. This bastard." Han Sanhe smiled faintly and said, "Thank you for your hard work, young Marquis Yun. It's my duty." Yunyang chuckled. "You all know the way back to the inn, don't you? I guess all of you won't be in the mood to gamble anymore. Why don't you just cancel the scheduled itinerary?" The generals from Daiyuan snorted and said, "Does Yutong forbid gambling and playing with small amounts of money?" Yunyang rubbed his nose and said, "Of course it's not forbidden. I'm mainly afraid that after you all go in, they'll target you all and make you feel like you're facing a formidable enemy. You won't be happy and you won't be able to enjoy yourself. Especially if there's a situation where winning or losing matters and someone dies, you'll be buried in a foreign land and won't be able to return. F***ck. The generals screamed inwardly, "What have we done? Why does it matter if we win or lose? Why do we have to be buried in a foreign land and won't be able to return? We really shouldn't have imagined that this fellow would say anything nice and not insult us." One of Dayuan's generals could not hold it in any longer and retorted, "How can you be sure that we won't be the one slaughtering everyone? It matters if you win or lose, but what if you lose your pants? Just tell me if you can find a place to gamble, there's no need for such nonsense." Yunyang chuckled. "Do you really want to play so badly? If you all really want to play, I can organize a single round for you all. What do you think? Single round?" The generals felt that this child was up to no good again and had set up a trap. "What single round? What single round? Are you going to participate personally?" Their voices were filled with caution. Chapter 198. Why should I? I can't be gambling buddies with all of you, but I have a few brothers and friends who are currently in Tiantang City. I believe all of you have heard about them. They are the 4 young masters of the 4 noble families of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Other than being filthy rich, they are just as bored as all of you. If all of you want to play, I'll let the 4 of them play with all of you, win or lose, just for fun. This way, the range isn't too big and there's no additional hostility. Yunyang smiled sincerely. Of course, if you're not willing to play or can't afford to, then forget it. Gambling with them requires a certain amount of courage and wealth. It won't be fun if you're not careful. When the generals of the various countries heard this, their interest was piqued, especially the few old gamblers among them, who felt even more itchy and unbearable. Yunyang's provocation aside, the title of the 4 noble young masters was a huge temptation. Yunyang not playing? Gambling with the 4 noble young masters? That was not a problem at all. As long as Yunyang did not participate in the game himself, there was no need to worry about cheating. After all, the 4 noble young masters were famous popinjays in the continent, almost everyone knew about them. Who knows, they might even be able to get to know each other through this gamble. Even if they could not build any kind of relationship, gambling was something that depended on luck. There were so many of them here, surely their luck would be much better than those 4 fellows? The crowd had even begun to imagine that they did not need to win much, as long as each of them could win a few hundred pots of wine, it would be enough. What's the big deal about playing around? Let's set this single round for tonight. Can you arrange it? A bearded general asked. It was the general who had invited Dayuan. He was still feeling the pinch after spending so much money. Now that there was a chance to recoup his losses, how could he let it go? Will this single round be arranged in a regular casino? Another person asked. There was a big problem with this question. Under normal circumstances, there were too many experts in the profound sky continent. Controlling gambling devices remotely and interfering with the key to winning or losing was simply too easy and too common. Therefore, any slightly larger casino would set up golden profound stones. The so-called golden mystic stone was the forbidden mystic stone. In the casino, as long as there was a golden mystic stone, then within the range of the golden mystic stone's influence, no one would be able to freely use profound chi. Of course, the gold mysterious stone could only affect a cultivator's use of chi on a small scale. It could not really suppress the use of chi on a large scale. For example, if a cultivator burst out chi regardless of anything, the gold mysterious stone would no longer have any effect. However, those who used chi to cheat in the casino all used delicate and subtle methods, which were restrained by the gold mysterious stone. Other than that, there was a limit to the golden mystic rock's limitations. It would be difficult for the golden mystic rock to be effective against an expert above the 9th peak. However, the problem was, which expert above the 9th peak would be so bored as to play in a casino? Even if they did, it would be for real. Why would they use high-level mystical energy to deceive themselves? On the other hand, relatively large casinos would often use golden mystic stones as floor tiles to completely cut off the possibility of cheating. That was why that person had asked such a question. It wasn't difficult to guess that this person was definitely a frequent customer of the casino. Whether it's legal or not, we'll know immediately after we try it. Yunyang smiled and said, "The casino I mentioned even has a ceiling made of golden mystical rock." The generals were relieved when they heard him. There was really no possibility of cheating then. They could only rely on luck and skill. Almost everyone who liked to gamble felt that they were the best when it came to these two aspects. "Let's go tonight." For a moment, 30 to 40 people's eyes lit up. Those experienced and prudent generals, or those with high authority, would not go to such a place. Those who responded were basically generals in their 30s and 40s. Some of them were even winking at Yunyang. Yunyang snorted inwardly. This group of fellows, firstly, wanted to win money and look for excitement. Secondly, it was because there was something going on. Especially the collusion between the generals of these few countries. There seemed to be quite a number of people who hadn't come to an agreement during this period. Perhaps they wanted to take this opportunity to communicate and discuss the possibility of cooperation, or perhaps they were simply plotting something with each other. Yunyang was well aware of these matters and said, "That's settled then. I'll arrange it now. I'll bring everyone there after dinner. We'll meet at the entrance of the tower to heaven in then. Be there or be square. Leave quickly. Let everyone have a good time tonight. I won't be a hindrance to all of you." The generals rolled their eyes. "This child knows that he's causing trouble for us as well." Han Sanhe smiled and said, "Young Marquis Yun, don't forget that the blood of the hero that we've ordered will change on the day of our return. Please supervise us." Yunyang replied, "That won't be a problem. Actually, they're already working on it. When you leave, at least the first batch will go with you. I've already given the silver taels from the other day to the merchant, but when you take the first batch of wine away, you'll have to settle the remaining silver taels. This can't be helped. After all, they need cash to circulate as well. Just give me the money when the time comes." Han Sanhe guffawed. "Of course. Besides, we're not afraid that young Marquis Yun will go back on his word." After a few words, Yunyang chuckled and turned to leave. "Before the casino tonight, let's go through the follow-up plan of the four empires again," Han Sanhe said in a low voice. The old marshals nodded silently. Perhaps the biggest gain from this trip was the plan of the four empires that these old men had come up with in the past few days. Other than that, there was nothing else that could be said about it. If it's possible, this old man hopes that Han Sanhe's voice was as soft as a mosquito's hum. That Yutong will be completely crippled in our hands, or even annihilated. So, old brothers, please keep your spirits up. Don't make any mistakes on your side. Of course. Of course. Our hearts are all in the same boat. Yunyang had only stayed for a short while when he returned home before he turned into a light breeze in his room and sped towards the residence of 9 Supremes. He had to go, he could not be late. Too many experts had died in their last night. More importantly, 6 high-level mystical beasts had perished as well. If Yunyang had been late, the mystical cores of the 6 mystical beasts would have been dissolved into pure energy by the 9 heavens domain. The 6 mystical beasts, especially the 6 mystical cores, were a huge fortune to Yunyang, who was currently broke. He could not afford to miss it. How could he allow them to be melted away? The night was dark, the boundless darkness shrouding the heaven and earth. Only the residence of 9 Supremes was still shrouded in clouds and mist. The only similarity was that one could not even see one's own fingers. A gust of wind blew quietly. Yunyang had entered the residence of 9 Supremes soundlessly. He had done so without anyone noticing. 18 to 19 corpses were scattered on the ground made of an unknown material. Each of them had died in the same manner, they were all charred black, even their bones had been charred. Yunyang heaved a soft sigh. He had thought that these people would have brought something good with them when they came in, perhaps he could earn an extra fortune from the dead. It was no wonder that Yunyang was so greedy for money that he would not even let the dead go. He was just too poor right now, so poor that his pockets were even cleaner than his face. It was a pity that the experts from various countries who had perished in the residence of 9 Supremes had some banknotes on them, but they had all turned to dust by now. Despite his disappointment, Yunyang's trip had not been in vain. There were still some sparkling items on the ground that were worth the price of his return ticket. Yunyang picked up the sparkling items one by one. He had actually picked up hundreds of mystical stones and dozens of mystical crystals. Just this alone was already a considerable harvest. Besides, there were a few sabers and swords that he could have gotten his hands on as well. They were the personal weapons of these martial artists, and they were definitely not ordinary weapons that could survive the 9 heavens domain's thunder calamity wind. However, Yunyang did not touch them. Firstly, he already had the divine edge, so other weapons were no longer of interest to him. Secondly, these people had died in the residence of 9 Supremes. If he sold these personal weapons and traded them, it would inevitably reveal something and leave traces. The hall on the other side, however, made Yunyang overjoyed. The hall was the focus of Yunyang's trip, the 6 mystical beasts. Yunyang examined them and found that the highest level of the 6 mystical beasts was 8th level intermediate, while the other 3 were 8th level beginner level. Even the 2 weakest ones were 7th level pinnacle. Of course, what surprised him the most was that the corpses of these mystical beasts were all well preserved. It was not difficult to imagine that the ability of mystical beasts to withstand the natural forces of heaven and earth was much stronger than that of a human being. The clouds of the residence of 9 Supremes had already surrounded them, absorbing the spiritual qi in the air and absorbing it into the clouds. It was fortunate that Yunyang had come earlier. If he had come any later, the remains of the 2 7th-level pinnacle mystical beasts might not have been able to resist the invasion of the clouds. Yunyang, who was familiar with the power of the 9 heavens domain, dared not delay. He flashed the divine edge with a swoosh and was about to collect the mystical cores with a single slash. However, before Yunyang could move, he stopped abruptly. This was because the moment the blade of heavens will appeared, the surrounding clouds suddenly parted in all directions with a glint of the blade's light. Chapter 199. The change was out of Yunyang's expectation. The clouds of the residence of 9 Supremes dared not approach the divine edge. This saber actually has such an advantage. Yunyang thought of other aspects immediately. If this saber can be effective on all the objects in this world that are cloud, fog, smoke, and air, those mysterious places that are covered in fog all year round, those mystical lands that are filled with miasma, doesn't it mean that as long as I hold this saber, I'll have a bright future? Yunyang was overjoyed, but the effect of the divine edge on objects in the air still had to be further verified. It was more important for him to collect the remains of the 6 mystical beasts. With the saber in hand, Yunyang quickly retrieved the mystical cores of the mystical beasts and dried the outer layer with mystical qi. After a simple treatment, the mystical cores that were initially wrapped in the flesh and blood of the mystical beasts were now round and clean. It seemed like Yunyang was exceptionally familiar with handling such matters, and he was overflowing with enthusiasm. These were all treasures. However, how should he use these mystical cores? Should he give them to Emmy for nourishment? Or should he give them to the 4 noble young masters to auction in exchange for his and Emmy's cultivation resources? In all fairness, of course, it would be better to let the 4 noble young masters auction them. The gains would be greater and it would be beneficial in the long run. However, Yunyang could feel Emmy moving in his subconscious space. It was twisting and turning, its soft cries filled with pleas for food. Yunyang knew the pros and cons, but he could not hold himself back and gave half of it to Emmy. Emmy accepted the mystical core with glee and placed it at its roots, burying it in a hole dug with its vines. After a while, it was even more delighted. The two leaves swayed together as the emerald green vines danced in the air, twisting and turning as they cried out incessantly. It was like a child who had suddenly received delicious food, overjoyed. Although the pauper Yun Yang had given away half of his newly acquired gains in an instant, he felt his heart soften when he felt Emmy's joy. With a chuckle, he returned immediately. There would be a sumptuous banquet later. As long as everything went smoothly, he believed that there would be a large sum of money that would help him escape the title of pauper. Boss is inviting us to gamble? Dong Tianlong clutched the letter, his face filled with shock and disbelief. This matter is a little strange. They want us to gamble, and we can only win and not lose. Go. Why not? Chun Wanfeng's eyes lit up. I've been bored out of my mind these past few days. Xia Bingchuan, do you really have eggs? Qiu Yunsan asked, why isn't that old eunuch doing anything? Didn't he promise to give us the luminary paste? What's wrong with this old bastard? Should we tell boss and go directly to the palace to find him? The luminary paste was a big deal. There's also boss's share. Everyone looked askance at him. Dong Tianlong raised his voice, oh, young Master Qiu seems to be in a hurry for the luminary paste. TSK, I heard that it's good for men. TSK, young Master Qiu is in such a hurry. TSK, is it because, Chun Wanfeng, young Master Qiu can't take it anymore. Xia Bingchuan, so young Master Qiu can't make it, Qiu Yunsan was enraged. Who said that? Who said that? All of you, stop talking nonsense. We still have to support boss tonight. Tell me, how are we going to win against those guys? How much silver should I bring? Also, do we need a secret code? Dong Tianlong guffawed. Qiu Yunsan is changing the topic again. Ha ha ha. It looks like this fellow really can't take it anymore. Oh my god, young Master Qiu, how old are you? This. Sigh, I suddenly feel like I'm not classy when I'm with you, Chun Wanfeng chimed in, people say that one takes on the color of one's company. Could it be that those who can't take it anymore? Why don't young Master Qiu stay away from us? Xia Bingchuan agreed. That's right, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Qiu Yunsan was flushed as he shouted angrily, you're the one who can't take it anymore. All of you can't take it anymore. I only wanted to fight for some benefits for everyone. Who would have thought that all of you would be so cunning and shameless? Dong Tianlong slapped the table and guffawed. Ha ha ha. So Qiu Yunsan really can't take it anymore. Qiu Yunsan really can't take it anymore. Dong Tianlong's voice was loud and deafening, traveling far and wide. Qiu Yunsan's face turned purple. He rushed up to cover his mouth. Brother, you're my biological brother, all right? Lower your voice. When they arrived at the towering wind pavilion, the three great young masters of Chun, Xia, and Dong were still laughing like washbasins. Their hearty laughter could be heard a few streets away. Qiu Yunsan followed behind with his head hung low, his face pale. Shui Wuyin rolled his eyes as he looked at these fellows. He had heard the three lunatics' laughter when they were 3 streets away. As the laughter got closer, they had actually entered the towering wind pavilion. They were still laughing after entering the pavilion. Had their laughing acupoints been struck at the same time? Ha ha ha. This is a casino. Ha ha ha. The environment here isn't bad at all. Ha ha ha. Why isn't boss here yet? Shui Wuyin really wanted to roar, F*CKU. What's there to laugh like this? All of you are crazy. It did not take long. Under Yun Yang's lead, a large group of people arrived in a mighty manner. There were more than 60 gamblers from various countries. There were quite a number of generals from various countries who had come this time. Those who stayed in the inn and did not come out were mostly experienced and prudent people. Those that Yun Yang had brought along were basically below 40 years of age. Once they entered the towering wind pavilion, their eyes shone. Starting from 3 feet into the door, the walls on both sides, the floor and the ceiling were filled with forbidden mystical stones. Under many of the gambling tables in the hall, the forbidden mystical stones were densely arranged. Even the edges of the tables were embedded with forbidden mystical stones that were emitting a faint red glow. They were the ultimate grade forbidden mystical stones. Not to mention anything else, just based on the current situation, even a 10th perfection grandmaster would not be able to use Xian Qi to cheat. Even if no one noticed it, the ultimate grade forbidden dark stone would automatically emit a white light warning. What a great place! The bearded officer's eyes shone. I love fair competition the most. This casino has the most forbidden mystical stones I've ever seen. The 4 popinjays stood up at the same time. Wow, boss, long time no see. Yun Yang laughed and introduced them enthusiastically. Once the generals heard the word boss, their expressions darkened for a long time. Were they all this fellow's underlings? They had thought that as long as Yun Yang did not join the game, they could avoid a certain someone's trickery to the greatest extent. However, they were all his underlings, the probability of them playing tricks behind his back was much higher. However, most of the people who looked at Yun Yang's expression were more curious. The 4 young masters of the 4 noble families actually called this fellow boss? What was going on? Many of them could not help but re-evaluate Yun Yang. After all, everyone knew how proud and arrogant the young masters of the 4 great clans were. Even if he was an ignorant and incompetent hedonist, his standards were definitely high. How could they call someone boss so easily? Either that, or they were completely subdued. Or perhaps, this person was hiding a shocking profit on him. Other than these few possibilities, there were no other possibilities. No matter what kind of ability Yun Yang possessed, he was a dangerous character that was worthy of people's attention and vigilance. In spite of this, everyone's attention was quickly drawn to the gambling table. No matter how dangerous Yun Yang was, it was something that would happen after today. It would not be too late to think about it in the future. They would gamble today and enjoy themselves to the fullest. The problematic characters would be dealt with tomorrow. Come to the gambling table, we're all brothers. Come, we only recognize gold and silver here. Waha, we recognize treasures of heaven and earth, mystical stones and mystical crystals too. Dong Tianling leaped onto the table and roared, come, what do you all want to play? How about dice? Pai Gao? If you really have a special hobby, there's even a mahjong table over there. F*CK, this casino is of a high class, they have all sorts of gambling devices. Great. Come, just for this young master will be the banker first. Come. Spear of Dragon Emperor Dong. Ka. Everyone turned to look at him when they heard him. Could this young master of the Dong family be an impostor? The legendary young master of a noble family was actually purple? In spite of this, everyone was really here to play today. It was proper for them to observe the situation first. They were all experienced gamblers. After one round, they could basically tell whether someone was cheating or not. Obviously, Dong Tianling and even the 4 noble young masters were all sheep. At least, they were not the type to cheat. Everyone swarmed forward at once. The 4 noble young masters were the bankers on their own tables for the time being, chasing the original bankers away. Instantly, they shouted and cheered as gold, silver, and banknotes flew everywhere. The dozen or so people went to another table to play mahjong quietly. Was this something that needed to be discussed? Shui Wuyin greeted them calmly, pacing around each table with his hands behind his back, a faint smile on his face. Seeing that everyone was already having a great time, it's so crowded today, so many unfamiliar faces. How about I join in? A voice came quietly from the door. A person dressed in white suddenly appeared in the casino, not a speck of dust on him. Yunyang frowned and glanced at Shui Wuyin. Shui Wuyin was surprised as well. The casino had been closed immediately after the group of sheep had entered. How did this person come in? Shui Wuyin's expression did not waver as he asked with a smile, "Friend, what is your name?" The person dressed in white replied coldly, "Friend? I dare not. I'm only a gambler. Since you've opened your doors to do business, surely you wouldn't reject a guest who's here to support you?" Shui Wuyin's smile grew gentler, his tone gentler as he said softly, "There are friends everywhere. Since you've come to this place, you're my esteemed guest. What does it matter how you address me?" The person dressed in white's face looked like it was covered in a layer of frost as he said, "I'll say it again. I'm not your friend, you're not my friend either." Yunyang observed this uninvited guest from the side, feeling that the person dressed in white was actually rather familiar. However, he had never seen this person's face before. Hold on, Yunyang's thoughts cleared up as he recalled the white silhouette that First Court King Qingguang had been pursuing relentlessly that night. Chapter 200. Thinking of this, Yunyang's heart skipped a beat. He took a step forward and laughed, "A casino, a casino. Of course, gamblers are welcomed the most. Since this brother wants to play, the host will welcome you with open arms." As he spoke, he shot a glance at Shui Wuyin, seemingly unintentionally. Shui Wuyin understood and said, "What would this brother like to play? Do you have a preferred method of gambling?" From Yunyang's sudden intervention, especially the ambiguous glance, Shui Wuyin immediately realized that this person before him might have an extraordinary background. At the very least, he would not be a simple character. What kind of person could make Supreme Cloud think that he was not a simple character? Let's play dice. Victory and defeat are clear and immediate. The man in white was unmoved, but he said coldly, "There's something I have to say first. I only have 50 silver taels with me." 50 silver taels, the man in white's abrupt words enlightened Yunyang instead. He said leisurely, 1,000 gold taels isn't too much, nor is a single copper coin too little. If there's a bet, there's no loss. Boss Shui, bring this brother to Qiu Yunsan's table. I wish this brother good luck and a fruitful return. At the table, Qiu Yunsan was the banker, shouting and yelling, his face flushed with excitement. He guffawed from time to time while a group of generals cursed and scolded him. Young Master Qiu must have won quite a lot and was in high spirits. Shui Wuyin brought the man in white over and spoke directly, "Young Master Qiu, this is Boss Yun's friend. He's here to play a few rounds." Qiu Yunsan guffawed. "Tell boss not to worry. Boss's friend is my, Qiu Yunsan's, blood brother." Shui Wuyin nodded and turned to leave without another word. Although the time they had spent together was short and they had not even had the chance to speak, Shui Wuyin was someone like him. He could already tell that to Qiu Yunsan and the rest, his words were nothing more than bullsh*t. Only by using Yunyang's name could the matter be settled smoothly. Yunyang and Shui Wuyin separated, going back and forth to check on the results. Both of them were the only two people in the gambling hall who had not joined in. After a long while, the gambling table supported by Dong Tianling became extremely noisy. The continuous shouts were so loud that they almost lifted the roof off the building. But he heard dozens of people shouting themselves hoarse, "Little. Small. Small. Ha 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 ha. F*ck his gu ji. Dong Tianling, who was the banker, on the other hand, yelled angrily, spouting obscenities, King hell, a bunch of bastards actually managed to win your father's money. F***ck, F***ck. The generals did not show any signs of weakness. Bullshit. We're at the gambling table now. Even if it's the emperor's money, we dare to win. Damn it, hurry up and open it. If you don't have enough money to be the banker, then get out of here and let me do it. Dong Tianlong cried, not enough capital? Today, I will make sure all of you lose so badly that you will take off your pants and walk out. I'm so angry, so angry. Yunyang shouted from the periphery, Dong Tianlong, I'm telling you, if there's even one of these fellows who walks out with his pants on, you better F***king go home with me. The mission I'm giving you, the price is clearly stated. You have to win them all, not even a pair of underwear is allowed. Dong Tianlong howled, don't worry, boss, I'll F***ck them to death. The generals chortled as well. How dare you boast so shamelessly when you're alone? Watch us brothers take turns to kill you. Again. Young Master Chiu slammed a bunch of banknotes on the table, his face flushed. Your father doesn't have anything else but money. There were at least 40 to 50 banknotes in the thick stack of banknotes, and the lowest denomination on top was 10,000 taels. Once such a large sum of money was revealed, a new wave of excitement was ignited. Amidst the strange cries, the gambling began once again. Yunyang and Shui Wuyin walked around and saw that these fellows were gambling themselves hoarse and were extremely engrossed. They walked to the side and gathered together. How is it? Yunyang asked. The man in white only watches and doesn't gamble. He has watched more than a dozen rounds up until now but has yet to make a move. Shui Wuyin said, this person either has an ulterior motive or he's a veteran. I'm leaning towards the latter. Yunyang did not ask clearly but Shui Wuyin knew who he was asking about and what he was asking about. Why do you have such a judgment? Yunyang asked. I believe that Supreme Cloud can tell that this person is an expert. Shui Wuyin's eyes glinted with a sharp glint. The aura I feel in front of him is as majestic as a mountain, and this mountain is an iceberg, a bone-chilling iceberg. This person's cultivation base can be said to be higher than anyone I've ever seen. Shui Wuyin's voice was hoarse as he spoke slowly but in an exceptionally serious tone. Although this gamble of ours has been premeditated, the date has yet to be determined. It can still be attributed to chance. It would be too far-fetched to say that such an expert has come with a purpose. That's why I'm leaning towards this person coming in to try his luck, because he's short of money. After all, our towering wind pavilion's reputation is rather good. As long as he wins with real ability, he can take any amount of money with him. Logically speaking, there's no reason for an expert like this to be short of money. Even if he was short of money, he would have a channel to earn it. However, there are only two possibilities for him to come here. Either he doesn't have a channel to obtain supplies here or he simply likes to gamble. He's chosen to earn money through gambling, a risky method, and isn't willing to use other methods. This person should be a more principled person. Shui Wuyin said, such a person would usually be well prepared and would never allow himself to fall into such a predicament. Therefore, he must have his difficulties. Such difficulties, other than a powerful enemy, there's hardly anything else that could force such a person to such a state. Shui Wuyin's voice was slow. After each sentence, he would ponder for a while before speaking slowly. Finally, he concluded, if I'm not wrong, this person must have a formidable enemy in Tiantang City that he can't fight against. This formidable enemy might even be a formidable character that he can't defend against. Once they meet, it'll be difficult for him to even escape. Pure admiration flowed from Yunyang's eyes. Eighth brother was right. Shui Wuyin's mind was truly remarkable. Based on the fact that the other party had come in to gamble, he was able to deduce the truth of the matter. It was more than rare. If Yun Yang had not seen this man in white being hunted down by First Court King Qingguang, he might not have been able to deduce to this extent. On the other hand, it was because Yun Yang knew the background of the man in white that he knew that Shui Wuyin's deduction was not wrong at all. It was not difficult for him to take advantage of the situation. Since he wants to win, let him lose. However, 50 silver taels is too little. Yun Yang said in a low voice with a smile. Shui Wuyin understood tacitly and said in a low voice as well, "I'll go take a look then." He then left with a sleeve of his arms. Yun Yang smiled faintly and stood where he was, waiting for the good news. In this casino, there must be a large amount of forbidden mystical stone, genuine and genuine. Even if a pinnacle expert were to come and use mystical qi, it would be impossible to be completely silent and flawless. This understanding was absolutely correct, and it was what all the gamblers were most at ease about. However, having the forbidden mystical stone did not mean that there was no way to cheat. At least, in this realm, there was still one person who could resort to underhanded tricks. Shui Wuyin. Under the premise that all the cultivators in the continent cultivated mystical qi, Shui Wuyin, as a mysterious member of the Ling clan, cultivated the Ling clan's cultivation method. He could use the power of his soul to intervene and achieve the goal of changing the final outcome of the game without a trace. This should be the main reason why Eighth Brother made Towering Wind Pavilion into a casino and not some other business. Yun Yang despised his eighth brother inwardly. This fellow's plan from the beginning was to cheat others. With such an undetectable cheating presence, it's hard not to profit from opening a casino. On the other side, the man in white had watched 20 to 30 rounds and seemed to have finally made up his mind. The moment he saw Chiu Yunsan put down the dice cup, he placed 50 silver taels on 7 without hesitation. Single bet. Single bet was a relatively rare betting method for dice gambling. 3 dice would roll a maximum of 18 points, and the minimum would be 3 points. There were a total of 16 single bet options, so once the bet was made, the odds would increase tenfold. If he had bet on 7 points, Chiu Yunsan would have to pay 500 silver taels. A tenfold return. However, no matter how high the odds were, there was only a 1 in 16 chance. How could it be easy to bet on it? The people around were all surprised. Was there really such a game? Was he really so confident? Or was he desperate to lose? Had he not gone crazy from wanting to get rich? Shui Wuyin stood outside the crowd, watching with his arms folded. Chiu Yunsan opened the dice cup amidst his guffaws, only to see 3 dice inside. 1 was 2 points, 1 was 1, and 1 was 4 points. The total number of the 3 dice was actually 7, F*ck me. It's really 7 points. Chiu Yunsan craned his neck, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets. Am I seeing a ghost? Chiu Yunsan cursed, but his hand did not hesitate, pushing 500 silver taels to the man in white. Although it was a tenfold return, the man in white's starting bet was too little. It was only 50 silver taels, a meager sum. The people around him couldn't help but sigh at how good this person's luck was. How could such great luck fall on his head alone? They also lamented that they didn't place a few thousand or 10,000 taels of silver on 7 points. Otherwise, they would have struck it rich too. The man in white, on the other hand, stood tall, his expression indifferent. It was clear that he had expected this outcome, and it was completely within his expectations. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.